Yeah, my name is Connor. I run a YouTube channel named Counterpoints. I myself am having boomer audio issues on my end, but basically, I identify as centrist or center right. I do spend a majority of my time fighting leftists on Twitch panels, so that's kind of where I got my chops. But Gasim and I have actually, I want to say two. We've talked in private, but we at least have two published conversations between the two of us where we've talked about Middle Eastern and North African politics, the balance between like terrorism and global security, immigration and all that kind of stuff. So if you kind of want like a 10 head nerdy conversation about cultural interchange and immigration and terrorism and Islam and faith and Middle East and North Africa, I like to think that we're both smart enough to do it service. So if that interests anybody in the audience, then I invite you to check it out. Gasim, whether we have a nothing burger tonight or if we have a poop show, I trust Gasim to be smart enough to be able to make it entertaining and fun at the same time, and educational as well. So I'm gonna mess with my boomer issues while you continue on with your stuff. I'm presuming that your mom's listening. I like so, well, then I can cuss all I want, then, can't I? Oh God. Mhm. Right. Right. That that's actually, yeah, that's literally what I wanted to do. That's part of the reason why I brought Gasim. Is basically I was thinking we could watch the Great Replacement, which is an 11-minute video. Do it on two times. It'd be 5.5 minutes long. You might have to redo your overlay. That way we can actually get it on screen while we were doing it. But we could do that at two times. That way it's like 6 minutes. We could pause every now and then if we found that there was something objectionable and kind of like talk it out between the progressive, the centrist, and the right winger. And then same thing, there was actually like a really intelligent fella, or at least ostensibly intelligent according to internet circles. Okay, yeah. So Sean did a response, and it's about 20 minutes long. So if we did two times, we could get through it in 13 minutes, and we could address the variables and criticisms there. And then the reason why, or what's sparking this conversation from my perspective, is that if there was two cardinal sins of the Southern brand, it would be the Great Replacement video, and it would be the boat incident. So I feel like if we did, oh, don't worry. We're gonna do that next week, Lauren. So, I don't know. It's your show. Hmm.
Stuff, then we have a debate on some sort of lefty progressive issue, and then we end with liking Carl again because he talks about nuclear energy.
Hmm.
But every time he opens with some complete misinformation about the boat stuff.
Well, but see, this is where I kind of, and from my end, the people who are streaming on my end, fixed it, guys. Shut up.
I'm just getting this.
I can verbally abuse my audience. They're big enough to do it.
Oh, I look so bad in this video, but okay. Do I have to put it on screen? That's the biggest concern here. Who cares about the content everyone's mad about?
Well, I mean, if you just want to do audio, I don't really care. So all right, so hold on, let me just make sure.
I'll put video up. It'll just take me a minute.
Okay.
Okay, so before we jump into it, have either of you watched the video? I'll be honest. This is going to make people really mad, but I feel like the thing people are mad about with the Great Replacement video is like their misunderstanding and thinking that it's connected with the Christchurch shooting, which the only connection is using the same name of Renaud Camus' theory. He never watched the video before deciding to do the attack. Like, there was absolutely no inspiration that came from this video. So that's the biggest criticism of it, which is actually inaccurate. So I'd be curious to hear before watching if you have watched it and what your criticisms are while I set this up.
So I did watch the video, but I'll say the first time, maybe the first time I ever actually kind of got familiarized with your work was through Sean's response to the video.
Okay,
And I did
so you've
watch
only
it
watched the response.
No, so I actually watched it afterwards. I watched the response, then I watched your video afterwards.
Okay.
And then for me, obviously, I've watched it within the past week or whatever in preparation for this, and then that's kind of what I was thinking, was because I think it is a lot of people who aren't necessarily watching the original content itself, and it's kind of like the implications are more nefarious than what's stated, or the believed implications. So
Right.
that's kind of where I thought it would be interesting to basically just do this, just go over it. Then we can say like, hey, let's pause here. You said this. Lefties or progressives, like hopefully I have an ear for that, but I'm hoping Gasim has an even better ear for it than I do, where he might be like, this is what you said, but this is what a progressive hears, and what do you mean by that? And then that way we can kind of like get the balance between the perspectives and the implication versus reality and all that kind of stuff. So
Right. Okay.
and then
Sorry, 1 minute.
flesh out the concepts. And then just while I got your audience's ear for a second or whatever, the other reason why I wanted to do this is, of course, because Lauren's like the queen devil of right wing alternative media sphere. So I was kind of hoping to basically just direct people to this video when they're like, hey, Lauren's a bad egg, she's a bad apple, and I can be like, maybe, but did you watch this? In which my 10-head genius, high-level IQ progressive friend Gasim and Lauren and I discuss some of her controversy, because I feel like that actually could be productive.
All right, cool. Playing cover for the Nazi queen. That's going to get you some good points on Twitch.
Is it cover if you address your controversy head on with critical people?
I'm joking. I'm just saying that's what they're going to say.
I know, but
it doesn't matter.
to the lefties who are watching this in the future, platforming is when you share a platform with somebody uncritically. We are being critical, and we're asking questions. And we're not just asking questions. We're asking
questions, right.
We're asking questions that should be incisive and get to the point and hopefully explain some ideas and perspectives. So that's what we're doing tonight. So yeah, whenever you're ready.
Okay. Guys, this is the ugliest layout for something ever. Don't judge me. I didn't want to screw with my camera layout in the bottom screen. You know what? I'll just show you. I'll just show you the disaster that this layout is.
Oh, this is perfect. I love it. This is great.
It's disgusting.
I'm so ready.
Man. Oh, sorry. I just changed windows. Oh, no. What's going on? There it is.
You're being a boomer. That's what's going on. All right, cool. Let's see if we got audio for everybody. Let's do it. And then what I would say as far as like rules, let's do let's start listening to it. If anybody has anything that they want to pause on, Lord, if you want to pause on something to explain, then pause it. And then Gasim or I, if we have a question or a comment or a contention, then we'll say pause. And then if it gets too heated, we'll obviously move on for the sake of time, but we'll try to get through it as quickly as possible. And then if you want to make it 2 times on your end, Lauren, so we're not here forever, then that would be great as well.
Okay, first contention. I look disgusting in this video.
Okay, I have to compliment Lauren. You look great. Shut up.
You're wrong already.
The bleach hair, the roots, no.
Okay, I was going to say, no. I despite all of the criticism, I think, all right, so I'm just going to torch some lefties now. I'm going to torch their own credibility. I'm pretty sure, like, the main thing they say about you is that you're a problematic wood. So hopefully Mrs. Southern isn't listening to that. Let's keep it moving. Stop being self-deprecating in ways that, don't work. All right, let's go.
All right. Let's do it.
I do not have audio on my end.
Oh, you don't?
I do not.
How can I make it so that you guys can hear? Can you open the Twitch, maybe? No? Oh, okay. How do I have to, like, screen share with you guys?
Is there, if you have are you using OBS?
Yep.
Can you add an OBS for okay, there should be something called like desktop audio or something like that on your OBS screen. If you go into this is literally something I had to do for my people. Go into the settings wheel for desktop audio and then change it to your headphones, and then that way your audience should be able to hear whatever is played on your headphones.
Okay, so Advanced audio properties?
No.
Nope.
So dead in the center, there should be desktop audio. In the bottom right, there should be a gear wheel. Click on that. Go to properties.
Play it through my
then-
headphones.
And then go device.
Oh,
then-
so they'll hear everything I'm hearing in my headphones, basically?
Yes.
I have to figure out.
Sorry to everybody at home who is very excited for the 10-head fucking bloodbath, but we're all boomers here, so we're figuring it out.
Okay, wait, how is that going to make it so that you guys are going to hear? That's just going to change what people on Twitch are hearing.
Stream.
Oh, that's a good point.
What are you talking about?
I'm a fucking idiot and a boomer, and I'm figuring it out as I go. All right, we'll just pull up your Twitch and we'll watch it with you with 5-second delays because we're idiots.
Everyone in the chat is like, "Sir, like it's working." They're even posting the old Pepe emoji for you.
Oh god.
Teacher Connor.
Listen.
Oh, they're saying Teacher Connor. He's wrong.
While being wrong. Yeah, this is classic boomer shit. So yeah, like absolutely. So
Okay, what are you guys on Twitch? Are you watching?
yeah, I'm on Twitch, but now I'm watching an anime character do an advertisement. So, you know. Oh god. Y'all could how about you start without me and you pause at an interesting perspective, okay? How about that?
All right. We'll give you a play-by-play. Are you good, Elegid? I don't want to pronounce your name wrong. Like I've done enough.
Yeah.
Apparently I've done enough crimes.
No, it's all good.
Are you good?
Okay, so I'm gonna have to mute.
Afraid
Play
to talk
1.5.
about because they're worried about being called a
Okay, so
bigot
I'm
by
gonna have-
both the people on the left and the right, surprisingly. So in order to
Play
avoid people
1.5.
trying to discredit this video with name calling of Nazi or propagandists or other such nonsense, it's going to be a very data-based video for the first bit. So bear with me, because the thing I want to talk about today is the Great Replacement. The Great Replacement is a term coined by French writer Renaud Camus, referring to what he views as the irreversible overthrow of France and its culture by Muslim immigrants from the Middle East and North Africa. The Great Replacement is a very simple concept. You have one people, and in the space of a single generation, you have a different people. Despite various misrepresentations, Camus does not oppose current immigration policy out of racism or Islamophobia, but on the basis of the preservation of French traditions and culture. And though Camus has had his eyes set specifically on France, his concerns have been shared by many nationalist and identitarian movements all across Europe. But the real question that comes in now is there any evidence that a great replacement is actually occurring? Or is Camus just another instance of paranoid white panic? Is he just another racist xenophobe who deserves to be convicted of a hate crime in order to pay a €4,000 fine? Yeah, that actually happens in Europe.
All right, can we pause there?
Yep.
So I might be 5 seconds in the past, but basically we got up to the description of Mr. Camus, we got up to the $4,000 fine and all that kind of stuff, and then also just kind of the source. So in one of your videos, like addressing my largest controversy or whatever, you were kind of saying that like you actually thought that you were sourcing like a leftist thinker. And that would almost borderline be like a shield against criticism because you're like, hey, he's one of y'all. Can you kind of just like walk me through like the so for instance, like one, the backstory of this, what was this released in 2017, you said?
So this was released in 2017. And Renaud Camus, when I initially found him, I was literally planning on making this video based on the article that is on screen right now called The Last Days of a White World. And there was kind of a trend to talk about this in progressive circles where it's like, white people are being replaced, Mayo side, this is great. And I was like, I wonder if we could take a perspective on this that looked at it for what the potential problems could be with this. Like, instead of just celebrating it, could there be potential downsides? And I wonder if any academics have discussed this. So I looked into it and I found Camus, and I just did a Wikipedia search. My bad, trusting Wikipedia at the time, I suppose. But I would recommend anyone who Wikipedia's Renaud Camus now, go to a Wayback Machine and look at his page in like 2016, 2017, and they are polar opposite, like completely different. So his page, when I did this video, the first sign that I was like, it should be okay to reference him is he was Yale published 3 times. So one of the top academic institutions in the United States, right? He was an LGBTQ activist. a socialist, from what I understand. I think I'd have to go look at that again. And he had some conservative social policies, but he had created a party, a political party at the time, that was largely like a kind of left wing with some more conservatarian policy mix. But like his page, it was like LGBTQ activist, socialist, Yale published academic. I was like, all right, this should be fine, right? He's generally seen as a leftist activist.
Well, in
Today,
sorry, go ahead.
yep.
Oh well.
Oh no, go ahead.
Yeah. So what I was gonna say is, I wouldn't mind, kind of setting the mindset of a alternative media consumer at the time, who was white and in the Western world. And then Gasim, if you kind of want to, I don't know, like bust in with just your perspective before we move on. Basically, what I would say is, we going in the way back time machine or whatever. Looking at just Wikipediaing these articles really quick. The 2015, during 2015, there were the Paris attacks. There was like the Bataclan attacks, and in 2016 there was a Pulse nightclub shooting. And kind of what happened from a veteran but also a private citizen's perspective was that the 9/11 happened, global war on terror kicks off, we invade Iraq and Syria, we withdraw in 2011. The Arab Spring happens, which has like all this promise of democracy and reform and like all that kind of stuff, but then it becomes civil wars and dystopian nightmares where the governments crack down against their own people and start brutalizing their own citizens. Between that, economic hardship and all that kind of stuff, it seemed like a massive wave of Middle Eastern and North African immigration was occurring, I believe, between 2014 and the time that this video was shot. What was basically like, it was a few million people. I want to say it was like 3 million people. And along with this wave of immigration came several terrorist attacks. The Bataclan Paris attacks being like the most prevalent. Pulse nightclub shooting literally happened 20 minutes from my house. And this was kind of in the backdrop of the global war on terror in general, in which from like 9/11 2001, we'd had like the DC Beltway shooter, we'd had the Boston bombing, like we'd had all this other kind of crap that kind of poisoned, I would say, poisoned my mind against Middle Eastern and North African immigration, to the point
Did you mention the Nice one? I'm
Yeah,
not sure yeah, the little girl on the ground. That one was just like, that
right,
really got people. Yeah.
Right. So there was, and then there was like the truck attacks as well, along with the Bataclan, that basically, and then I think there was the German, there was like the German Christmas Day attack or something like that with a truck, and there was
they were like happening literally every second week at that time.
Right. And my frustration at the time, because I'm consuming alternative media, is I just felt like the mainstream media was like shoving its head in the sand, where they're like, we can't talk about terrorism, it'll all be fine, everybody's going to integrate, it's all going to be good, shut the fuck up, like that's what it felt like.
Well, the thing is, they're actually still doing that today to an extent. Did you hear about the attack this morning?
No, I didn't.
Yeah. So funny enough, we're talking about this video, which, although it absolutely didn't, people claim inspired terrorism in New Zealand, falsely claim. And there was just an Islamic terror attack in New Zealand this morning. 6 people stabbed, a bunch of people critically in the hospital, and they had been tracking this guy for years. Sri Lankan immigrant that they literally had on a watch list, and they were so close, they were like watching him when he went to the grocery store. And those ones are the ones that really get me, where it's like, you were watching this guy. He wasn't even, he wasn't a citizen. So it's like, you invited someone into the country that just did harm. And I guess they didn't start watching him until 2015, to be fair, and he immigrated in 2011. But this is part of the reason that I'm also for, like, any country, doesn't matter what ethnicity or background the country is, like, that's a lot of resources you put into something that eventuated in just the potential slaughter of your citizens, right? And so you need to be careful about who you let in your country. You need to have some checks and balances. And I don't even think leftists disagree with that, looking at how hardcore they are with the COVID borders.
Okay, so
I don't think I disagree with it either. I did see this on the news, so I just want to ask, why would you think the media are necessarily burying their heads here? Since
okay, so for
I'm
example,
pretty sure it's been over the news.
Well, so we
Yes.
can.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say. So we don't. Trust me, I'm not. I'm not trying to divert contention. I'm just trying to keep contention on the subject that we're focusing on. Because if we want to get into a debate about how like the media sucks, I mean, we could just go watch Destiny's video. You know what I'm saying? Like between y'all two
Sure.
to earlier today. So
Yeah.
what I Gasim, like what I would appreciate, just so we can stay on subject with contention, we can be contentious. When you hear two honkies from the Western world, kind of describing these historical events, like what is your perspective of the same historical events, and how do you perceive like kind of like the immigration, the terrorism attacks, how it was addressed, and kind of like the reaction from the Western world at that time?
Well, I see it as a complicated subject because at that point, as you said, there was a rise in like global terrorist ideology and form. So we had Al Qaeda, ISIS was quite big at that point. And while it does tie into the whole immigration thing, I think for a good chunk of it, it's not strictly an issue of immigration because I know at least some terrorists were born and raised in some of these countries, even second, third generation sometimes. Um, it's it's a complicated situation, and obviously all types of violent actions against innocent people is problematic. And like Lauren said, it makes sense to try to protect, your citizens, regardless of their background either. Um, so, like, immigration checks are good and they exist and it's fine. I don't think there's any contention there.
Right. That's a fair take, I think. Should we keep playing the video and see if there's any contentions that you have further on?
Yeah.
Or were there any other questions to set the ground?
Yeah, honestly, like what I would say from my perspective is let's keep it moving, and then if there are like because I think we're gonna bump into other contentions. So what I would say is let's at least get through your video tonight. If it feels like we're getting bogged down or breaking stuff down, we can come back and do like the Sean's video another time. But I feel like if y'all wanted to do after the video, if y'all just wanted to break it open and be like, this is my perception of Western media. This is my perception of Western media. This is where I feel like they're being hypocrites. This is where I feel like they're not burying their heads in the sand. Like, then we could open it up and y'all can just go, because I trust both of y'all to be smart as fuck and, have contention. So let's just
trust us.
don't abuse it. So like, let's all right. So yeah, I would say let's keep it moving, and then if there's something that's tangential, then let's address it at the end of your video, and then if we have time, we can move into something else. So let's do it.
Good.
All right, let's go.
Oh shit.
Net migration. In other words, the sum total of people entering and leaving the country, to create the false impression that the numbers are smaller than they actually are, and to play a numbers game that distracts from the real question of demographic changes over time. And also, in France, for example, a law dating back to 1872 forbids the official collection of data based on questions about race or religious beliefs. So yeah, people are very, very uncomfortable talking about this subject, which is why YouTubers like myself who can't get fired from their jobs have to do it. But despite all of these roadblocks, the stats that we do have access to paint a pretty clear picture. In 1993, 7% of the UK population was foreign-born, and 3.6% were foreign nationals. With the 2004 European Union enlargement and drastic shifts in immigration policy, those numbers rose to 13.5% and 8.9% in 2015. These populations are primarily of Indian, Pakistani, or African background, and as of today, it is estimated that 1 in 3 newborns in the UK are non-white British. And if these trends continue, white Britons will be a minority in their own homeland by 2066. And this is just a fact. Whether you think it's a good thing or a bad thing, you have to acknowledge that this is happening. Though there are no government statistics, Pew Research Center found that 2/3 of all migrants arriving in France are Muslim, and the International Journal of Environmental Science and Development found that today Muslims make up roughly 10% of the French population, compared to 0.6% in 1950. That is an insanely high growth rate. And with the disparities in birth rates, the non-Muslim population will continue to decline as the Muslim population multiplies in France well above the replacement rate. So simply based on...
All right, can we pause there?
Yep.
All right, cool. I don't think
we're gonna.
Yeah, so I don't think we have too much of a lag. So basically, what I was gonna say is, from my perspective, the European sensitivity to criticizing like demography, religion, ethnic background, anything like that, just from an exterior perspective, it is rooted in World War II. Like that's absolutely the root of the sensitivity.
Okay.
It is basically.
Do you have like documents, or like did you listen to the cases where they brought in a lot of these laws, or it's just an assumption?
No,
because that makes sense.
I'm not Destiny. I didn't come with any data. Like, so, like, but my presumption, because World War II is a big deal in the United States, right? It's one of the biggest cultural achievements of the United States of America is defeating fascism during World War II. So I would feel like, as the people who either fought alongside or fought against fascism, there would be a cultural sensitivity in Europe to isolating people by like demographics, religions, or whatever, because for them it kind of feels like a slippery slope. The second you start talking about demography, the second you start talking about religion, the second you start talking about like cultural differences, then who's to say that somebody isn't going to see these differences, isolate these people, and try to exterminate them, pressure them, oppress them. And then when that comes to, basically like cultural issues, I would compare this to like Hispanics or Black folk inside the United States. There is a perception and a feeling of second-class citizenry in the Western world when it comes to Blacks and Hispanics. So I could see how, on one hand, it would be like a reflexive sensitivity due to the fallout of World War II. And then I would also see it as like a reflexive sensitivity against like for progressive and left-wing folks to want to defend people who are perceived as like second-class citizens within the country. So that's kind of where I was thinking that some of that sensitivity would be coming around, but also to acknowledge a point that you said. So far in the video, it's been descriptive, where it's literally just saying, these are the demographic trends. This is what we're seeing so far. But what was pointed out, I think this was one of Sean's like primary criticisms of your video, was that just because a demographic trend is going in a certain direction doesn't mean that it's going to carry on that same trend forever. And when you look at like second or third generation immigrants to the United States, I think in particular, their birth rates actually tend to drop down to that of the host country. And I'm pretty sure you see a similar thing by like the third generation in Europe. And that's all the, like, I know there's no contention there, but that was the contextual information that I wanted to add. So Gasim, do you have anything that you wanted to add there?
Yeah, so I think even in the video, if you saw like the issue with demographic data collection went back to like the 1800s, like in the case of France. So while I'm pretty sure World War II probably played a role in that, I think the idea of just historically having all these like tribal infighting, or like demographic infighting, say in-groups and out-group fighting, didn't make a whole lot of sense, and people try to move away from that. I see this because, like in Sudan, for example, your religion should be generally a private thing, right? But in Sudan, it's a legal thing as well. That can't happen in the US, and I see why, and I find that generally to be broadly useful.
What do you mean by it's a legal thing in Sudan?
Well, it carries legal status, right? So
your religion does.
Yes. Mm-hmm. It's the same in a lot of places in the Middle East. Like they'll ask you what your religion is. In Sudan, it goes even further, though it doesn't carry a legal status. But when you get in your nationality, they'll ask you what tribe you're from. Like you have to say, hey, I'm from this specific tribe, which comes from like a specific part of Sudan. And that type of information, like broadly speaking, data is good. And this is a thing I think Sean brought up, and an issue I have generally when people argue is data. Data is data, it's fine, but it can't necessarily, data isn't racist and isn't in itself problematic, but inferences from data and ways you collect data can be problematic.
Sure. Do you think it's fair to say, and this is to both of you, do you think it's fair to say that unless something changes, it's probably fair to say the trends are going to continue in the same direction, though, as in maybe not necessarily the birth rate trends, but the immigration trends in general?
Yeah. And what I would say is I'm thankful because I live in the United States. The majority of the immigration that's coming into the United States is Central American and South American. These are both like Christian or post-Christian colonial cultures. The people who come here tend to have like a really strong work ethic. They care about family, like all that kind of stuff. And I think a lot of the same things can be said about like European economic migrants, but then obviously there's this historical clash that I'm just gonna fucking say it. I don't know if anybody else is gonna enjoy this little detail, but let's just say that there's a little bit of a history between Christian religious warriors and Muslim religious warriors having some contention through the past. I think that would be fair to say through the past 2,000 years. So with that very mild assertion, what I would say is when you look at the global war on terror, or if you look at Islamic immigration, it's very easy to frame these things within the religious lens of the wars of the past 1,000 years, and then basically to otherize and attack people along those lines. When we look at these like differences between folks and kind of people using the pretext is often along religious lines. It's often along that framing. Sometimes it's along ethnic framing. And that's where I kind of see the danger. And by the way, I don't see the bigotry as one-sided here. So for instance, when we're talking about like criminal organizations in the United Kingdom that view the girls who are in the foster care system as not deserving as the same rights of women of the religion of Islam, since they're basically foreigners and they're whores and all this kind of stuff, we can treat them like shit because they're not a part of the in-group. So I don't see that bigotry as one-sided, and to take apart that bigotry is going to be really fucking hard.
Right.
So I'm not envious of anybody in this position, but I'll stop ranting.
So
now.
do you think that scrubbing the data is going to make dealing? Do you think I don't think anyone would agree that that's going to get rid of these issues. It's probably just going to make them harder to understand.
I would rather
not tracking the data. In my opinion.
Yeah, I'm an American, so basically, like, I like knowing the ugliest parts of my society, and kind of like I feel like sunlight is the best disinfectant. So like exposing the ugly reality of history is better than trying to conceal it. I don't know how you feel, Gasim. So if you want to address that stuff.
It's very pro data. Like a big chunk of my research right now is data analysis. So the existence of good data, though, not just any data, the existence of good data, I'm always for. But in terms of projecting the numbers into the future, like not birth rates and stuff, you said if nothing else changes. I'm not sure what that means, like nothing else changes in terms of like immigration policy? Or
like yeah, if immigration
or...
policy doesn't change, or if so for example, I've spent a lot of time in France, particularly an area called Porte de la Chapelle. There's a video people are very angry about there as well, where every day like hundreds of people arriving by bus and train to this area with no passports, no ability to get a job there, and just I don't know if it's to the same rate right now, but just hundreds of people arriving, and usually it ebbs and flows based on season because it's more difficult to get by boat to Europe during the winter than during the summer. But if nothing changes in immigration policy and, closing down the borders, would it not be fair to say that these rates of immigration will probably stay the same, as there are a lot of people around the world desperately trying to get to Western countries for various reasons, some of which are very legitimate?
I would say no. I'd say there will always, like, the numbers, there will always be people trying to get to Western worlds, like throughout the time, but the numbers themselves will vary significantly based on geopolitics, global economy. The thing is, you're going to have to look at what factors drive immigration. Immigration policy is only one of those factors. So if you like stop or you hold immigration policy constant and try to analyze the numbers, you're going to have to consider all other factors at the same time. So there was a period, like, for example, the Syria war right now, for example, I'll say you might see an uptick in immigration due to the situation in Afghanistan right now. But like it's almost impossible to say one way or another if a specific trend at a specific time will carry on into the future.
Well, and I want to add something here, because I feel like there's a selfish reason for Americans to not be isolationist. which is basically that if countries are falling apart, if they're fucked over by either climate catastrophe, civil war, bad infrastructure, or anything like that, then there's constantly going to be economic migrants. There's people who are going to want to work in better societies, that are going to want better opportunities for their family and for their extended family. They're going to want better education, all that kind of shit. It's just like, you can't, and I'm pretty sure it's like 2/3 of the world like has a cell phone now, something like that. It's some fucking insane number of people who relatively don't have anything but do have access to the internet and do have access to a cell phone. So if they see that a higher standard of life is available, but they just don't have access to it, then they're going to do everything in their power to get there. So while isolationism can be attractive because you can say, I don't have a moral duty to anybody outside the borders of my country, and therefore the entire world can go to hell on a fucking pogo stick and I don't care. I think that basically looking at the world from a more and I know going to get called a globalist cuck. I promise I'm a civic nationalist. But basically what I would say is what's going to happen, whatever happens across the globe is eventually going to affect you here. And so that's where I would say, while not necessarily opening up the floodgates, opening up the borders, just letting everybody in all the fucking time, regional and national stability of other countries is important. If you don't want immigrants to your country to be constantly coming, then the places that they're coming from can't constantly be interrupted by either climate catastrophe or civil war.
Yeah, and I will confirm this was something I saw on the ground. What you were talking about with the cell phones is, and this is also actually a problem with how the Western world treats social media, is when I was meeting a lot of the men on the ground in Morocco who were trying to get on the boats to Spain, they were like showing me videos and they're like, I'm going to be a football star, I'm going to be a rapper, like this is how you live when you're in Europe. And a lot of them spoke like they genuinely believe that's how most people lived in Europe, not knowing, you know, that there are a lot of struggling people in Europe as well that have no work, living on the streets. So that was a really interesting factor of it. I do want to clarify with both of you. So far, it sounds like most of your problems, or not even problems, it sounds like you just want to add more context to what has been said so far, rather than say something in the video 4 minutes in has been deliberately untrue or wrong.
Sure.
So I have one problem, like based on the previous section. The thing is, if we're going to do a Sean video, I don't want to nitpick on like the data part, since the Sean video kind of goes into the data part. But there is one point I think Sean missed, which I found problematic in the video, which is specifically you implied that the way the data is gathered or being presented is to hide the demographic change. Like you put a level of intent there. I would say that can be read multiple ways. So, you know, like some people can listen to that and think, okay, so this is a conspiracy about some people in power and actors hiding demographic changes for some nefarious reasons, right? And you can also see it as, okay, so maybe they just don't want to show like how bad the situation is. Like it can be interpreted in many ways, but in the end, you put a level of intent there that I don't think you justified, like in your video.
Okay, so I'll tell you what I was thinking there, and genuinely, I mean, it was a few years ago, but even what I'm thinking now is trying to clarify why there would be difficulty getting much data on the subject. Like I've tried to pull things from sources, but it's challenging to get solid data on the subject because there is so little. And you know, this is a problem when discussing issues of transgenderism as well, is there's just a lack of data in so much of that subject. So making definitive statements can be really difficult, which is why and we'll have to watch the rest of it. I genuinely have not watched this video for years, but I don't think I make any statements that are like 100% definitive in this video. If I do, then it'll be interesting to see what those statements are. But now I certainly wouldn't, looking at a general lack of data, which I have pointed out at the beginning, which I think is important to point out if there is or isn't a lack of data on a subject.
Yeah, before we move on, I want to point out one thing that maybe isn't nefarious, but somebody could read as nefarious intent. So for instance, like when it comes to the UK in particular, you know, we basically showed like a 0.7% to 10% increase of the Muslim population inside France over, you know, 50, 60 years or something like that. As an American, that actually feels kind of slow. When it comes to the United Kingdom, though, with the basically native-born Anglo, English folk are going to be the minority in the United Kingdom. I think the United Kingdom is kind of similar to the United States in a certain way, in which that the United Kingdom is kind of like was a global empire. They did have interventions in India and Afghanistan and Pakistan and Jamaica and like all these different places. So it kind of makes sense for the Commonwealth to kind of have like a flow back effect where you have like commercial and military interests all over the world. Then there's going to be a certain amount of like cultural and economic and military interchange that flows back. And unfortunately, for the America First right wing, and specifically the America First right wing that cares about demography, I do see the next century, barring any super extreme like border policy, basically a similar effect, because American empire has intervened all over the globe, whether that's like West Africa, North Africa, Middle East, Asia. We have a touch all over the globe, which means that we're going to get this flow back effect where cultural, military, and economic interchange is going to bring different people here. And I think that's different versus like Ireland, for instance, which has largely been like an isolationist country up until, I don't know, 20 years ago. So, that it's a little bit different than some other European counterparts that have been historically like monoethnic, monolinguistic.
Well, this is actually why there's a lot of immigration to France in particular, because of so many African nations that speak French. Even French Canada is having a massive wave of Haitian immigrants because they learn French in their schools. So they are, to be fair there, at least they're trying to make some cultural connection with, I want to be able to speak the language of the country that I go to, which I think, that's like a baseline for going to a country, being able to communicate with the people there, right?
Yeah. Well,
but there are a lot of other cultural differences that I think do need to be discussed there.
Well,
as well.
and since I'm flexing my, my globalist, credentials or whatever, which I don't want to be doing, I do think that like language is like a necessary prerequisite for any country. Like if you're moving to a country, that is incumbent upon you to adapt to that culture, not that culture to adapt to you. So like, that's just a personal perspective. But if y'all want to move, I'm ready to move too.
Yeah. Are you ready, my friend?
Yep. Yeah, let's go.
I'm so scared of pronouncing your name wrong.
It's Gasim.
Don't worry.
Gasim. Well, it was Elegid before, now it's
Elegid is my
Gasim.
handle.
Well, it was
Gasim is
Elegid
Gasim,
before,
I
now
guess.
it's Gasim.
Elegid is
Man,
my
I have people
handle.
calling me bigots for nothings these days. All right.
You're good.
France looks fairly sound. But France isn't even the biggest problem. The situation is probably the worst in Germany with Angela Merkel's open door immigration policy. 1 in 5 people in Germany today are either foreign nationals or have a migrant background. And these populations are disproportionately represented in younger age groups. 36% of people under 5 have a migrant background. And Pew Research found that while Muslims made up about 5% of the German population in 2010, if the federal government continues to rely on open-door immigration from the Islamic world in order to keep their ever-declining German population stable, this percentage is sure to increase in the coming decades. Trends in Europe tell the same overall story. As the native European population dies out, migrant and Muslim populations are rapidly growing with higher birth rates and unfettered mass immigration. And with the median age of 32 for Muslims in Europe, 8 years younger than for all Europeans, 5 years younger for the religiously unaffiliated, and 10 years younger for the European Christians, the future of Europe looks pretty halal. Now, I know you guys don't just come to my channel to hear me read off statistics, so let's talk about how this happened.
Do you have something you want to say, Connor? Do you have something Is there something you wanted to...
Yeah.
Are you regretting doing this?
No. We gotta open the fucking can of worms. Jesus fucking Christ. The future of Europe is looking pretty fucking halal. Like, I cannot imagine a more fucking 2017 sentence. Holy shit. So, all right. So,
Like, Gasim, what do you think of that sentence?
I guess it was a good joke.
Thank you. All right. Based. We can move on.
I think
okay.
it's
So the
not
one
a factual,
Sudanese
but it's
guy,
funny.
the one Sudanese guy gives a stamp of approval. You can say, I have a Sudanese friend, and now you can say whatever the fuck you want. I see what you're doing.
Absolutely.
All right. Okay. Well, I mean, that's what I do in my
He gave
Discord.
me the halal card.
Yeah, well, that's actually, that's what I do in my Discord too. So,
Also, you did use halal, which gives you extra points instead of using haram. Because if you said the future looks pretty haram, that would have been less funny. But okay.
But yeah, you used it correct. Awesome. All right, cool. Yeah. So, all right. So let me break it down a little bit. So I think that I'm using a little bit of hindsight as 2020 glasses when it comes to my objections, but Angela Merkel and Germany, while being at that time probably like the most open border, the most we're going to take everybody, we're going to do everything, all that kind of stuff. I'm pretty sure after their far right wing basically went from 2% of the political establishment to like 13% or 15%. They literally had like a double-digit jump in representation. I'm pretty sure like Germany walked back some of their open door immigration policy.
She even said it was a mistake and that it was caused. Yeah,
which we could talk about, like the pull effect of immigration is basically like when you have a reason to be someplace and it's better than where you're at, then you're going to be pulled to that location. So if somebody publicly is saying, come to Germany, we'll welcome you with open arms, we'll find you employment, we'll integrate you into the culture, that's going to be more of a pull effect than, let's say, Poland, which basically says, we're putting razor wire on our borders, you can go fuck off and die in the cold. Like those things are going to have a similar or a different effect on people who are choosing to immigrate to Europe. So while not an objection, that was like another descriptive part of this. And then I guess like the propagandist or the media literate part of me or whatever is just seeing like the waves of people crashing across the crashing across the barbed wire while we're talking about these things. And then basically within the backdrop of the Great Replacement, your script is more nuanced. But if you were to take the implications of the Great Replacement, combine it with the imagery, and then combine it with Angela Merkel's statements, then I could see how people would basically assume like, oh, fuck, like I haven't had kids yet. I'm in my late 20s. I'm a European. I haven't settled down with a family. I haven't had any kids yet. My parents are old as shit. They're on their way out. And there's going to be a whole bunch of, basically immigrants who are going to come here, and they're within a generation, they're going to replace us. That might not be what your script says, but I could see how emotionally they would be getting that from the combination of language and visuals. So I'll leave it there.
All right. Anything else, anybody? Nope. All right.
No, I'll just like to that.
Oh.
Yeah, Gasim, did you have anything?
No, I'll just wait until a bit later.
Okay, cool. I'm ready. Okay, cool.
About how this happened. One of the biggest things that we can attribute to the cause of the Great Replacement is Western ethno-masochism. Basically, white people hate themselves, and if you look at groups like Antifa or even just your average college student or state broadcasters, many white people feel that replacing
Connor, you had something to say. Connor, you had something.
Not yet. Let's make it a minute before we stop. Holy shit. All right. Sorry. No. Play, and I'll play on my end. God damn it. All right.
Actively,
God damn it.
Biggest things that we can attribute to like Antifa or even just your average college student or state broadcasters, many white people feel that replacing themselves will relieve guilt of past crimes. So unlike almost every other culture in the world that wants to preserve itself and remain homogenous, Europeans actively invite the destruction of their tradition. And this is something that is recognized across the board by many intellectuals. It's rampantly supported within academia and politics. I think one of the greatest examples of this utter disdain for Europeans is probably displayed by a quote from a senior research associate at the Foreign Policy Center. Yasmin Abai-Brown stated that only white people worry about this. It's because for such a long time the world has been their own. To talk about it feeds a particular type of racism that says that blacks breed like rabbits. There is an underlying assumption that says white is right. There's a white panic every time one part of their world seems to be passing over to anyone else. But it's foolish to panic about it. So what if we do become a majority? What difference does it make? The empire strikes back, really. There was this extraordinary assumption that white people could go and destroy peoples and it would have no consequence. It astounds me. So basically, she believes white people...
Yeah, can you pause right there?
Well, it's interesting how she uses the word consequence instead of saying like
impact.
Yeah, impact. This is just the impact. She's like, this is your consequence. And I think that's the language that would have spurred this video and a lot of videos like it is people saying like Mayo side, in Last Days of a White World, you deserve it. This is a good thing. Or like, the CBC white future. It's all of that stuff that pushes people to be like, whoa, you are the one portraying mass immigration in a bad light for white people. And we're responding to you portraying it as this is us deliberately, you getting your consequence.
Yeah, so let me give a nitpick, and then I'll punch left, and then I'm sure Gasim will be very happy to respond on behalf of all leftists. So basically, my nitpick or whatever is like the primary cause of this is Western ethno-masochism or something like that.
I would disagree with that today as well. I don't think that's a primary
right.
cause. So yeah.
So just to explain my version, and then I'm sure people would be happy to hear your version. So for instance, for me, it would be the geopolitics. It would be like the economic pressure. It would be the civil wars. It would be the failure of the Arab Spring. It would be the war in Iraq and Syria. It would be the war in Afghanistan. those would be the things that would be driving the immigration wave of 2014 to 2017, not a bunch of white people being like, hey, we were a bunch of like colonial anti-Jewish fucking pigs, so all of the brown people would need to come to Europe right now. So how do y'all feel about that?
Yeah, when I originally heard, it made zero sense to me when I heard you saw the video way back then. It's like, I'm not so sure I agree with that one, but we're not gonna go into it since, like, you already said you don't agree with that.
Well,
but I'll say it's.
Can I give you?
Mhm.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah, finish.
I will say that a part of, you can say a part of it might be the imperialist guilt, perhaps, that plays a role to some extent. I'm not sure how big of a role that is, but I think a good chunk of it is just like, I don't like to use the word Western, but let's say a good chunk of it is just like Western ethics/morality in terms of human rights, stuff like that. It's like asylum seekers and refugees, and we can't let people die. They're in this international law, respecting international law, stuff like that. I think plays more of a role than imperialist guilt.
Right. Okay. So to give you context, is at the time I had just come back from a big trip around Europe, and one of the areas I particularly toured around was Germany, and I went to a few areas. Leipzig, I think, was the town I took that picture in. So those pictures I was putting on screen of the posters, I took those myself, seeing them, and the actual poster says, like, breed out white people, quotes like that. I have to go back in the video, but like, no future for the white race, no future for German people.
Can you go back and take a look at that?
Yeah, so let's.
God,
there is no German future, right? So, and there were a lot of these. Let me see if I can find. I think I put another one in. So, no love for Germany, no nation, no borders. There was a lot of this stuff that I was coming across. There was literally a sign. You're just gonna have to take me on my word at this one. I'm sure I uploaded it somewhere, but there was literally a sign that said "breed out the German people" that I saw up in Germany, and like, that was just something that people genuinely, it's crazy, because that, how is that any better than if someone were to say, breed out all brown people? It's just
So I will say that is cringe based on internet language, but it's just, I'm not so sure how widespread that sentiment would be. I don't feel that would be a widespread sentiment outside of Germany or in Germany. I'm sure some people have cringe ideas / takes on everything everywhere. Like, is it that common? Is that really what's driving, immigration policy? I'm not so sure.
Hold on, I want to prove my leftist credentials, because I want to start beating up on the fucking lefties right now. Fuck. Like, it is so, like, it's not even cringe. It's fucking gross. It's just the inversion of fucking racism. It's disgusting. We wouldn't tolerate this for any other fucking group. When I say things like this, where I'm like, hey, that's fucking gross and disgusting, and we wouldn't tolerate this for any other group, I am happy to see, like, a split of, like, 80-20, 90-10. Leftists who are like, well, fuck you, honky, versus like leftists who are like, yeah, this is pretty fucking gross. So what I would say to basically people who are like that is, I'm gonna bully the fuck out of you on the internet because you suck and you're gross, and basically encouraging the end of any ethnicity or culture or group is fucking disgusting. And then what I would say too to any lefties in the audience or whatever is, like, I can feel that in my guts, the pull away from that, because I have a white son. He's got light eyes, he's got brown hair. He's committed so far through his life, he's committed no sins of his own. Whatever sins he's committed are sins of mine that I have imparted to him. So to hear that there's no future for him, or he's going to be bred out, or some shit like that, it puts in me an instinctive fear and a rage associated with that sentiment. And it's not like a logical thing, like, oh, it's just a bunch of dumb fuck lefties on Twitter, or oh, it's a bunch of like cringe anarchists on the other side of the world. This is an existential threat because somebody is talking about me in an immutable characteristic and how they want to destroy my group. So it triggers that fear. And then what I would say as well is basically like that that does not, Mayo side jokes do not make any of this shit better. It makes it a shitload worse because it basically drives people who are not willing to listen to progressive ideals at all. It just drives them screaming away in the opposite direction. It is an optics fucking nightmare. It is alt-right fucking jet fuel. So yeah, that's what I have to say on it.
Yeah. So 19, 20-year-old me, my first time traveling the world, and I come to Germany and this is what I see, and I'm like, what is going on in this country, right? Yeah, so that was my analysis at the time, not having as much geopolitics and travel experience as I do now. I was like, clearly, like, this insane thing I cannot believe I encountered in Germany must be the cause of this happening. And I also went to a place called, oh, I wish I could remember, Marxloh in Germany, which was a Turkish town in Germany. Like, all of them, they had giant flags of like, just giant Turkish flags that
Turkish
took up
flag.
whole. I'm trying to remember
It'll
what
show
the
up in the
leader's
video.
name is here. Oh, you've seen the video, yeah. And I was
It will show up
walking
in the video
around.
soon.
I was walking around, and I was like, what would happen if Turkey and Germany went to war? You know, two things would happen, both not good for the right or the left. One, Marxloh would revolt against Germany and join the Turkish side because that's clearly where their allegiance is. Or two, all the people in Marxloh would go into internment camps. The same way the Japanese went into internment camps in World War II, right? They'd be like, well, clearly you're on the other side, so we have to oppress you and take away all your rights or you're going to hurt us. So, like, it's not, to me, having a nation within a nation, I was like, this is so stupid. And that was the immigration that I was observing when I was in Europe. And yes, like I said, now I don't think the primary factor is ethnomasochism. I think that is a small aspect of it, certainly within political radicals, but the overall factor of geopolitics and as was said, the immigration policies of Western nations in general being very focused on human rights, and we want to make sure refugees and wherever they're from are safe. I think that is a large pull and factor as well, for sure.
And can I point this out, because basically one of the things that kind of frustrates for me is, on one hand, identitarian movements that aren't ethnic based but are religious based will curl it up in, like, Christianity, right? Like, we're Christian, we can't let anybody else in, and like all this kind of shit. But basically, one of the great ironies, at least maybe I was raised by hippie pacifist Christians, so maybe that's my problem, not yours to deal with. But at the same time, what I was taught a lot of Christianity was kindness to the stranger. Basically, what's the parable, the Good Samaritan. Like, that was one of the main stories I was told over and over and over again. Is like, who is your brother's keeper? The person who, like, keeps religious law but does nothing for the kindness of other human beings, or is it the person who ignores ethnic and religious differences but takes care of other human beings? So while you can view Western human rights and empathetic impulses as weakness, it's oftentimes rooted culturally in the Christian ethic of our forebears. And
that's true, yeah.
And that's kind of something that's frustrating, is you can't have it, you can't really, I guess you can have it both ways. But for me, this wouldn't necessarily be a sign of weakness. It would be a sign of strength, but it's a sign of strength that needs to be defended. So basically, if somebody's taking a massive shit on that, like a borderless, secular, anti-theist leftist is taking a massive dump on, like, Christian or Western ethics, that's where you need to turn around and you need to be like, hey, listen, the fucking ethics that you give a shit about, while maybe not religiously imposed at this time, are rooted in a religion that I care about. And I think that's a powerful argument. So I'm ready to move when y'all are.
Actually, I wanted to ask, because I don't think we established this at the beginning. Gasim, are you religious?
I'm somewhat religious.
What's your family background, if you don't mind? Just so I can...
both my parents are Muslim.
Right. Okay. But you're kind of not. You're shaky like Connor. Connor considers himself a cultural Christian, but not fully bought into it.
Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead, buddy.
Yeah. No. Yeah. It's. I'm not sure. Like, because people also use cultural X religion differently, but you could say I'm a cultural Muslim.
Okay. All right.
Ready?
Repeat after me. 3, You must prepare.
Oh, we played this.
Covenants of the deep. Now you shall perish.
Have you learned your lesson now? The way you follow me around like a dark shadow.
This way, promoting their replacement. But I guess welcome to Progressive 2017. Another one of the reasons this is occurring is the ideology that surrounds the idea of replacing things. Camus would refer to it as replacism. Replacism is the ideology of general interchangeability. So this idea that anything is replaceable and it will pretty much be the same. Humans can just replace another human. People can replace other peoples. Women can replace men. Machines can replace human beings. The living can be replaced by inanimate objects. It's all replaceable, and there's nothing particularly significant about the thing being replaced. And lastly,
Actually, before
one of the
we
big
move on
things
to
driving
birth
this
rates, I did
forward
want
is
to ask
birth
both
rates.
of
And
you
the
about
ideology
that ideology of replacism. So you heard a few of the examples I made, like men can be replaced by women, vice versa. Technology can replace humans. And the aspect of that I was getting to in this video is like you could replace the Swedish people with just Japanese people and it would be the exact same culture, right? What do you think of that idea? Would you agree or disagree with that concept?
Yeah, so I completely disagree with it, like fervently and aggressively. I think things are, like I'm not saying that things are only the things that they are. Obviously, we evolve over time, we change, and all that kind of stuff. There's actually a really interesting concept. I'll go ahead and shout out another channel, Adam and Sitch. So Adam and Sitch do like review videos, and they were talking about a concept called like prophilicity, in which the old kind of nature of identity was finding out who and what you are, figuring out what attributes made up your person, and then describing that to other people. I'm a man, I'm white, I'm European, I'm Irish, all that kind of stuff. Like I can find these things that already exist about me, and then I describe them to the exterior world. Whereas now that we have the digital age, we have a concept called prophilicity, which is basically you can customize your profile. You can choose what gender, not sex, but you can choose what gender you are. You can choose your color, your aesthetic, like who you are as a person, what kind of person you are online. And basically, like, if I understand the psychological concept, it was being exacerbated by the fact that a lot of our lives are now existing online, where so much of the experience is your expression of who you are and how you customize your personality for the online world. And that's kind of like a change. And I would see these concepts as linked with like basically the replacement of things, where everything's interchangeable, like all that kind of stuff. And I just think that's bullshit. The reason why I think it's bullshit is because I think it's rooted from like a South Park conception of language, which is basically like, oh, I can say whatever I want, even if it's offensive to other people, because ultimately at the end of the day, it's just words and they have no impact. And so what I would say is that no, words have meanings. They're rooted in ideas. They're rooted in descriptions of actual reality. And these words have power. Part of the sin of the past like 10 or 20 years is believing that our words don't have power while we've watched them completely reshape the world. The America First movement, the reactionary right, that would not have been possible without alternative media figures influencing the real media using their words. It would not have been possible without them basically influencing an already existent but kind of latent political demographic that has really surged in the past 5 to 10 years. And so I know I ranted for like 5 minutes, but basically like, no, things are not replaceable. Words have meaning, words have power. We have to pay attention and we have to use them wisely.
So for me, I guess it depends on what you mean by things being replaceable. So based on the idea of replacism, based on the way you presented this, I'm not going to say I looked into the philosophy or ideology, but the way based on you presented it doesn't make sense. I'm not sure if it's something a whole bunch of people believe in either. Like the idea that you can replace something with something else and that not being different. So for example, the example of humans being replaced by a robot. So it's something you can do, but I don't think anyone would argue that it's the same thing, that the humans and the robots will be the same thing in every way possible.
I don't think they're saying it's the same thing as much as they're saying it can serve the same function. So I don't need a woman anymore because I can get a sex robot, right? So I can replace them.
Sure. So in some regards that is true, right? But in many other regards it's false. I'm sure a sex robot can replace a woman in some specific, very specific regards, but in most other regards, it's not true. And that's just, I think, the way across the board. Like that's how it works. So I'm not sure if anyone actually believes it. That any two things, the more complex the thing is, the less likely you can just replace it with something else that's equal as complex or less complex.
Now, I think the controversial, spicy thing gets here is, can we replace people groups? And that is the ultimate question that Camus is asking. And I think what's interesting is my inherent interest in this question actually came from my being raised in Canada and the talk of the erasure of the ethnocultural indigenous people in Canada. And I think the left inherently do actually disagree with the notion of replacism. And that's why they talk so much about I just had the word on the tip of my gentrification. They talk so much about this idea of a neighborhood being whitewashed, right? And so they inherently agree that there are problems with replacism, but cannot apply or question whether there are problems the other way. And I don't think that's to say everyone that is brown or black moving into a white neighborhood is a bad, evil person, or that is a bad, evil thing every time. And I don't think it's to say anytime that some gentrification happens, that's a bad, evil thing every time. But the question is, are there changes? Should we talk about those changes, or should we just say, nope, it's all good, and if you question it, you're a racist?
Well, I was hoping we'd do the replacement thing at the end, but
Okay,
can you see that the term replacement, is very loaded, and when you look at it in the context of like current and maybe even projected migration trends, the term replacement is highly loaded and doesn't make sense in this way. So you said if we take Sweden and replace the people of Japan with the people of Sweden, that won't be the same. Obviously, it won't be the same. And I don't think anyone would be pro just, I don't know where you would put the people of Japan when you replace them with the people of Sweden. But I don't think anyone would be pro that happening.
Yeah. So
I
in part of what I want to address before we move on, because I know we kind of want to hold it more for the general before we get into like really, maybe more aggressive stuff. But basically, for me personally, the reason why I want to tamp down on the alarmism is because I'm a history nerd. So the reason why I want to, we've faced similar historical catastrophes in the past, and we've come out okay. What I mean by that is Benjamin Franklin, you can actually find these papers, where he is absolutely panicked about German immigration in the late 19th century because there's so many fucking Germans coming over that he's literally worried that they're just going to maintain their language and they're going to replace English, and America, which was supposed to be an Anglo project, is going to become a German project, and it's going to destroy the culture. Because of integrative efforts, that didn't happen. Same thing with the Irish in the late 19th, early 20th century. There was a lot of panic over, they're coming, they're stealing the jobs. They're a bunch of potato bog dwell. I'm ethnically Irish. Potato eating, bog dwelling fucking savages that have too many kids. They're Catholics. They're going to turn us into a papist state. It was actually like a legitimate conspiracy that when John F. Kennedy was elected, that he was going to swear his allegiance to the Pope over the United States. This was like a real panic in the minds of Americans. So basically, with those previous panics, while I think we can concede that there's real fucking problems, there's cultural integration problems, there's linguistic problems, there's conflicts, there's fights, there's riots, there's all sorts of like nefarious shit that happened during these cultural exchanges, but it wasn't a catastrophe. It didn't annihilate the culture. It wasn't the end of humanity. What about,
because that's actually not, so I'm going to give you what a lot of actually the alt-right talking points are on this.
Sure.
You look at the way that certainly progressives today react to what happened to indigenous cultures in America and Canada. Or a better example is probably Australia, actually, because they didn't have the same clash that the Americans have, where it was super violent, right? In fact, if you go to Australia today, you drive through it, a lot of the places you go to are named after indigenous names. The streets, everything, there's a lot of indigenous culture held, but it still disappeared and dwindled to the point that people feel like the whole country was stolen, and that's what they refer to it as. Always was, always will be is the quote, as in always was, always will be indigenous land. You're on stolen land, like you've destroyed and erased our culture, and that was through immigration. So that level of disgust and anger towards the disappearance of a cultural group and an ethnocultural people that the left have is essentially where a type of fear that the alt-right actually feel, and some people, not just the alt-right, but some people even just in conservative circles feel, is they look at how these people react and how angry they are about the loss of their culture, and they're like, we don't want to be that. So it's funny how there's that intersection of actual understanding, which is why I get really angry when there are right-wingers who completely deny the existence and need to preserve indigenous cultures, because it's like, no, like the reason you care about immigration rates is actually because you feel the same way they feel about their culture and heritage, and you want to preserve it, and you know that's something that's important to your familial history. So there's a lot of intersection there of fears and attachment to people's heritage.
Yeah, so but I know I'm opening up a can of worms, but this will segue into the birth rates. So that's kind of where, again, it's like it's really culturally convenient for me to be American. It's also very culturally convenient for me to be Irish and not Anglo. And the reason why is because, like, my cultural heritage, like, if you were to ask about I'm sure Keith would shit blood to hear me say this. But basically my cultural attachment to being Irish is like, I tolerate carbs well. I burn in the sun. I like dark beer. Like, that's pretty much like my cultural, attachment to my Irish heritage. I don't speak Gaelic. I speak English.
And you're American, right?
I am.
Actually, this video is specifically on Europe because
Sure.
I think that a lot of Americans that are like, especially in the Wignat stuff in America,
Mm-hmm.
they don't even know anything about their historical European culture anymore. Their idea of like ethnocultural preservation is just white, which at this
Straight
point
up.
it's like, come on, like literally, if you knew anything about your history, you would know that there are like extreme differences between different like
Whites.
white groups to the extent that half of whites didn't let other half of whites into their country because they weren't seen as white. They were wogs,
Yeah,
Oriental gentlemen.
is my American cultural heritage Budweiser, NASCAR, and fucking guns? Because I'm not complaining. Like, that's okay. Like, that's fine. But I also don't think that these things like NASCAR, guns, and beer are necessarily not shareable with other people. So that's kind of where I don't have as much attachment, I guess.
Like, you cannot connect on just being white. Like, you can't.
No.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Gasim.
No, yeah, I was just gonna bring up so the abrupt erasure of a culture. I'm not even sure the majority of, say, progressive slash leftists would be up for that, whether it's white or non-white culture. But it's just, I don't think we can establish that the migration levels or like global migration patterns, even projected ones, warrant that. The Australia example, I think, is not a good parallel to like current migration status across the globe. So like, while a lot of people just migrate to Australia, there was a whole lot of like colonizing Australia as well, which is mainly what led to the downfall of let's say native culture.
Could you?
So like, if you grant that, I don't know, you just open all borders and just have all of Africa move to Denmark because it's a small country, and just become a crushing super majority there, and just take over the country, and I can grant that would erase Danish culture. I just don't think that's happening, and I don't see that happening anytime soon.
Okay, so I think the question there is, this video spurred from literal mainstream journalists and massive papers saying it is happening and it's a good thing, right? So I think that's the question, is maybe you are correct in that they are exaggerating this, but would it be fair to say that mainstream articles and news saying this is happening would cause people to be like, whoa, whoa, whoa?
So I don't think so. They're saying they have very specific claims. The claims isn't that like the culture is being erased. They have very specific claims relating to numbers, ethnicities. It's a very complex thing. I understand part of the issue right now is the idea of culture, ethnicity, nationality, and a lot of other things are all intermingled. But these things are not the same thing. So when you say, for example, that and like, I don't know, the non-white British people will be a plurality, or like let's say a simple majority in the UK, that doesn't mean UK culture is being erased. Those are not the claims being made by any of these articles. And while those are some worries people have, I'm saying that's just not a worry people should have based on like the trends and what we see right now.
Well, Gasim, can I ask you a question as
Sure.
a concerned white? So
Go for it.
The Council of Concerned Whites
Yeah,
here.
yeah,
Gasim is here
join.
to quell our fears.
Thanks, buddy. I appreciate you. So I kind of meme about this shit. But like I joke about how like by 2050, like European Americans are going to be they're going to be a minority like by 2050. I think
European Americans.
Yeah. So
Okay. In America.
Yeah, in America. So
Okay.
So basically, we're gonna be a minority by that point, and I'm kind of like memeing because on like one hand, I'm like I can't wait to be a fucking minority. I'm a bitch so fucking much like as a minority. So hold on, let me make
Sure.
that's a meme. Let me get to the real point. The real point is the reason why I'm optimistic is because I feel like there's a lot of parallels between like Hispanic and American culture, like or European American culture. We're both colonial. We're both historically, culturally Christian. A majority, like I know that they're more sympathetic to like leftism down in Central and South America, but it seems like mixed economy capitalism would have a good future. They're social conservatives. Like really, the only barrier that I would potentially see is like kind of holding this back culturally moving forward together is maybe like language, where we would have to decide like English versus Spanish, who speaks what, when, where, why, all that kind of stuff, and then move things forward. So I'm optimistic about the future, but what parallels or what like I think a lot of people think that
Sorry, you're the only one I've heard say that in like 5 years. I'm optimistic for the future of anything.
I have a
Keep
child.
going.
I have to be optimistic. So basically, my question though is, do you think that there are as many opportunities in Eurasia between like the Middle East and North Africa and Europe, where we basically have like 2,000-year-old cultural divides that basically, and it's like a history of like conflict. Like what are the opportunities? Where's the silver lining here?
What are the opportunities for what?
Like cultural integration or moving together as a society or civic nationalism or any of that. Like
I think it's quite significant. Like if you look at trends of like people from, let's say, the most conservative places in the Middle East, and when they move to say Europe or US, if you look at their opinions on stuff, they're like to a large extent different from their opinions from like back home. And it's not as if a lot of these cultures don't have a lot. So I say this a lot. The conservative Muslims have a lot more in common, and it's also the same. Conservative Christians and conservative Muslims have a lot more in common than say conservative Christians and like agnostic, atheist, progressive Westerners. Like in terms of like values, in terms of the thought process as related to stuff, there's way more in common there between those two other groups. So I don't think the divide is as big as people think they are. I think people mostly look at radical elements, and those radical elements, you can boil down the divide to 2-3 elements that separate them from, let's say, Western culture. But at the same point, those 2-3 elements also separate them from the majority of Muslim culture as well. That's why they are radical extremists. So I don't think the divide is as big as people.
So what I heard there is that we could build a social conservative supermajority between conservative Muslims and tradcon Christians. That's what I heard.
Okay, I got to make a point there. Is everyone needs to go read the book. Wow, literally just forgot the book name. There's a French author who wrote a book literally on this, where in like 2051, Marine Le Pen's party joins up with the Muslim Brotherhood or something, and they start like the Christian Muslim,
the super conservative party.
What is the book? Does anyone in the chat remember? I read this like 4 years ago, so I'm trying to remember what it was written by Michelle Houellebecq. I probably pronounced that wrong, but it's a really, really good book.
Wait,
No
Yeah,
one,
and I think the
no
more
one.
was it fiction or was it like a non-fiction prescription for the future of
It
politics?
was a fiction prediction about what he thinks. Hollaback. Okay, here, wait. I'm gonna get the book. It's actually really just a fun read in general. Submission is what the book is called. And it's very interesting because the way he writes it is there are a few violent back and forths that happen in the street between like right-wing nationalists and stuff, but then slowly it's like literally like a few things on the news once or twice a day, and you're following a professor who's slowly going through a religious journey in his life, trying to find out where he stands, and the country slowly and peacefully just changes. And eventually, it comes in, the hijab gets worn in France all the time. And he ends up, the book is called Submission because at the end, spoiler alert, pause or like leave if you don't want to know the end, but he ends up becoming very good friends with one of the Muslim guys in his community. And he talks about his life, his relationship, having a wife, living the traditional Islamic life. And he's like, oh, okay, I'll convert. Like he just converts at the end, and everything is like totally peaceful and a slow change to Islamic culture in France. So that's like his prediction, that it's not going to be this big like race war thing, but people will just, it'll just be a submission to that different culture.
I don't see that happening. It's an interesting perspective that's different from other ones I've seen, but I don't see that happening either. Like,
can we really say like 100, 200 years from now? Because there have been massive cultural changes all throughout the world in countries completely changing their religion, even just the ethnic makeup of countries.
Sure, ethnic makeup is much more common, but the thing is, it's pointless to predict past, like, I think a certain amount of time. Like, anything can happen, like, say, 100 years into the future. It's just that the indicators and the trajectory right now doesn't lead us to kind of come to the conclusion that that is the most likely or even a likely scenario within the next, say, 50 to 100 years. Like, come on, like, the idea that France will suddenly become a Muslim country is just far-fetched, let's say.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying it's not. I just, I think I think you should guys should read the book. I think you'd like it.
Listen, I didn't,
and the thing is, it would be quite different because, again, there's a whole lot of variation within Islam, and I don't see the conversion rates of people, like, whether it's in the West or even like in Islamic countries. Like, I think people kind of tend to stick, especially religiously speaking. People tend to stick to, like, what they were either brought up with or what's like they're familiar with.
Yeah.
All right.
No, I agree.
Quick meme before we move on. I'm trying to convince all the American conservatives. It's like, if you start appealing to Hispanic social conservatives, like, the left wing is fucked. Like, they are so fucked. But because the right wing drags its feet in the mud about, like, obviously we need immigration controlled borders, cultural integration, all that kind of stuff. But because there's this perceived hostility to Hispanics, like, you could create the conservative supermajority. But anyways, let's move on.
Okay, like I'll just tell you right now, there's like a meme within the alt-right of convincing Hispanics they're white until they don't need them anymore.
Christ, all fucking.
Don't suggest that.
I thought you were saying you were spending a few minutes on 4chan today, not like 6 hours. Jesus Christ, Lauren, fucking reel it back in.
If you go on
bit.
like Reddit, the master race, like 90% of them are Hispanic.
Right? Yeah, like
there.
the most like aggressive alternative media conservative figure, Mr. Nick Fuentes, is of Mexican heraldry. Yeah, it's fucking wild. All right, but anyways, I'm ready. Y'all go. Heraldry. Yeah, it's fucking wild. All right, but anyways, I'm ready.
Impacted them.
Y'all
Our
go.
society, from both a conservative and liberal bent, both seek to solve our issues with birth rates in a very strange way. Instead of trying to fix the current birth rates in the West, they just say, let's import people from all over the world. So we tax people into oblivion to the point where they can't afford to get married, buy a house, or have lots of kids. Then we spend their tax dollars importing people and paying their welfare for their large families. It's just one of the dumbest things I've ever seen in my entire life. And that redistribution of wealth is one of the biggest promoters of this replacement. It creates a disincentive to repopulate for current Europeans and an incentive for migrants to try to come to the West. Now, after this whole rant about the problem of the Great Replacement, you may be asking yourself the question of, so what? Why should I even care about this? Well, the reason you should care about this is because the ideology of replacism is wrong. Once you replace
Ooh,
one population with
same
another,
example.
it will not be the same. Not even close. If you were to replace the Japanese population with the Swedish people,
Ooh,
do you think that
same
Japan
example.
would be the same? I can assure you, for better or for worse, it would not. Especially if you were to do it within the span of 100 years. We greatly overestimate the ability of peoples to assimilate, because in actuality, total proper assimilation is extremely rare. If I were to move to a Middle Eastern country, whether it be because I was forced over there by war or for economic reasons or just because I wanted to go there, no matter how hard I try, I would not be able to give up my Western values. I know that for a fact. They're ingrained in me. They were passed down from generation to generation, and I would want my children to adopt them as well, because we all want our kids to be able to relate to us and to share our values. And places like Molenbeek, Markslow, and the growing enclaves all over Europe are a testament that people coming into Europe from across the world are not so different in their marriage to the values they grew up with. So people really need to ask themselves, do you really think that the European people and culture are replaceable within a generation with no consequences? Do you really think that if the predictions of Europeans becoming a minority come true, Europe will still hold its same values and traditions? No matter what your opinion is on this issue, the Great Replacement is happening, and the younger generations will be forced to acknowledge it at some point in their life. It's just a matter of how far gone into the transition it'll be before we do that.
Okay, I will
Anyways,
admit there
I
I did make a definitive
thank you guys
statement
so
that
much for
this
watching,
is
and thank you so much to my
happening
amazing Patreon supporters
based
who make it so that I
on
can
which I'd Okay, said I at the will admit beginning there that I I'm not did sure make if a I made any definitive statements rather than observations.
Mhm.
I think obviously the data looking at immigration rates obviously going up, cultural changes obviously going up, but I think, like you said, with trends, we can't say that it's definitively. Yeah,
we only have 9 seconds left. Can you just play those 9 seconds real quick, and then we can?
it's literally me just like showing my Patreon.
Okay,
which
so
I
we
even
don't have to
anymore.
we don't have
Yeah.
to finish it. I took a
Yeah, I
couple of
think it's
notes.
done.
Gasim, do you want to go first?
So I
I'll
think
switch back.
the part which is kind of interesting, but also I think you just hedge towards so okay, without going around beating around the bush. But the part that I think is interesting, but maybe a bit abrasive, was the taxing people into oblivion so they can't, have kids in order to import people and pay their welfare. That's the frame is abrasive, which is not a big issue because if sometimes abrasive language is like motivates or animates people. But the question is the declining birth rate actually due to people being taxed into oblivion or not? I think that is a something you just kind of assert without
Yeah, that's a fair point.
substantiating.
I think there would be other. I think there's definitely economic factors, and that's a hugely, massively observed point when they ask younger families, "Why aren't you having more kids? Why haven't you had kids yet?" It's usually, "I can't afford it. I can't afford a home, etc." But I think, yeah, to say it's because they're being taxed to pay for immigrants might not be the primary reason, right?
Sure, and you need to look at the broader, because again, just because some people don't have kids because they can't afford it, you need to look, because a lot of people who are actually quite poor have a ton of kids, right? So you need to look at
that's interesting. Yeah,
you would need to look at like the broader factor that comes into play here, because there are a lot of rich people also who just have 1-2 kids or none at all. So there's a lot that goes into that, and I think just boiling it down into people being taxed to pay for stuff is not.
Well, that cultural difference in the Western world, we're kind of taught you don't have kids until you can pay for them. And I think, I mean, you'd have to confirm this for me, but certainly in poorer countries, it's like you have kids to survive. You're not going to get a welfare system of people to take care of you. Also, because family is extremely important in non-Western cultures, whereas there is a lot of coldness towards community and family as of late in the West. In fact, I'm not even joking. I considered making a video saying basically a condemnation of the coldness of Western culture and anti-family tradition that we're fostering here, really. Whenever I run into non-Westerners that work at stores or, I'm just out and about, they always want to pick up my son and hang out with him and play with him and say hello. And I was like, it's like shocking to me because I don't see that from Western women typically. I do see it from other cultural non-Western groups though, for sure. So that's a good point, I think.
Sure. And yes, I 100% agree with the societal looks toward families and attitudes and how important it is. And in most cultures, they do play a big role And I think that also helps with having children because, for example, I was raised, my mother worked, my dad worked full time, but my grandparents helped raise me, my dad's cousins helped raise me, our neighbors helped raise me.
Yeah.
It's so it, and I have like 4 siblings, so there's quite a few of us, and I'm pretty sure my parents would have struggled, just the two of them working full time. And it's not just a matter of money, right? Because there's a lot of time investment that goes into having kids. That's not, it has nothing necessarily to do with money. If both your parents work, or even one of them works, it can be a problem in terms of having like a whole bunch of kids.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair point. Oh, Connor?
Oh,
What's
yeah, I
say?
have about 1 billion notes.
Here's Connor with the essay again.
Yep, always. Fucking always. That's why they pay me the big bucks. So, all right. So basically, what I wanted to mention was that the United Nations actually did have a demographic replacement subsection. They literally talked about demographic replacement. And the motivation that they listed was economic. They were basically saying that Western countries are having less kids. They're an aging population. They're unable to, all of our social welfare systems are like projected off of continual growth. So, since we weren't having as many kids, immigration was viewed as a necessary stopgap in order to make these economic systems work, while maybe automation was on the way. At least that's the article that I read, was that this was the thing. So the reason why I bring that up is because I kind of feel like people saw a problem, came up with a game plan, and then didn't tell us fuck all about it at all. Like, they literally didn't tell us shit. They were just like, hey, immigration's good. You know, opening up the borders is awesome. It's going to be economically good for you. Culture ultimately doesn't matter. You can go fuck yourself. Like just enjoy it. And basically, like, while I think there's points to their argument, it wasn't anything that was consulted or consented or educated upon or anything like that. It was just, hey, we have an economic problem. We're going to solve it with immigration. And
Yeah.
and that's kind of where I kind of can't believe that they didn't see the cultural pushback coming, where people are just going to be like, what the fuck? In 1950 or 1965, I think it was like 80% European descended American. And now in like 2020, we're at like 24% Hispanic, 13% Black, like 66 or 70% European descended American. And by 2050, we're going to be an ethnic minority. It's like, hey, maybe if you told us the fucking plan, we wouldn't be as freaked out about it. But it doesn't seem like there was any level of consultation or education. It was just presumed to be a moral good and something that was acceptable.
I also think that there's a problem inherently with the idea of making immigration just around economics. Like, obviously, you're going to have problems with integration of different groups if the primary reason for your immigration is economic reasons. And I think, yeah, prioritizing, I want to immigrate to this country because, I'm in love with someone and I want to be a part of their family and I want to be a part of the heritage of this country and contribute to it. That is like a very positive, good type of immigration, I think. Whereas prioritizing, like, you have some people, and this actually just baffles me. You have some people that are family members. They're from a different country. They've gotten married to someone in another country, and they're waiting on 5-year wait lists. While someone who's just paying over to do business deals, well, like, bam, you're in because or even not even someone that's wealthy, someone who's not wealthy and is basically being used as imported slave labor for a company, bam, instant, you got your status, welcome into the country, because that immigration is being put before the actual important aspect of being human, which is your culture, your community, the people around you, wanting to be a part of a shared heritage and future, rather than just, I need money to survive as a human being.
This is where I would say my framework as an American is civic nationalist. So what that means is I have a very flexible cultural heritage. Black Americans are a part of my history. Hispanic Americans are a part of my history, and I've kind of boiled down like American constitutionalism to like 3 concepts that I think are they're so fundamental to our society. If immigration is going to change perceptions about these concepts, I don't want it, because I literally don't think a republic can survive. So what that boils down to is freedom of speech and freedom of conscience. I think that's one of the fundamental ground rules. The right to self-defense, including against the government, that's kind of boiled into the Second Amendment. I think it's one of the fundamental pillars of freedom. I know Europeans don't agree with it, but I don't give a fuck. Fuck the Europeans. And then it's also basically the limited government, not limited in a libertarian sense, but limited in the fact that when the government creates rules, it has to follow its own rules. These are all like fundamental, like cornerstones of a republic in order to maintain a republic going into the future. And I don't view the American Constitution as like some kind of historical mistake. I actually view it as one of the best founding philosophical documents for a multi-ethnic, multi-religious republic that is capable of being sustained into the future. But my fear is when I have leftists who don't, they're already my co-citizens. I can't kick them out. They're already a part of my in-group. And
What a shame.
I know, well, right?
That's a joke.
No, but on the level, it's really frustrating when they don't believe in what I view as cornerstones of my society, and they say it's not important for other people to believe in these cornerstones of my society, and that's alarming. It's fucking terrifying because I'm like, these are the three like most basic rules that I think are important to society. If we can't agree upon these, I don't know what we have besides like conflict. And that's what I'm worried about. I'm worried about you knock out the pillars, you knock out the cornerstones, we're just going to have civil war.
Gasim, anything you want to touch on there?
And not there specifically. There's other stuff I want to touch on, but I think for a large part, I understand where Colin's coming from. I think there's just going to be issues in terms of like what specific rules and how far they go. Like you put up the three main rules is like that. How do you enforce those rules? How do you get people to follow suit on those rules? And I'm sure like most complex societal stuff, the application can vary. So what you envision it as being might not be the same as what they envision as being, but that's
so
discussion we can have some other time when we
sure. I'll be brief. The answer is public education.
Are you capable?
Yes. The answer is public education. That's what it is. You raise the next generation to believe in the things that maintain your society. That's the solution right there. But I did.
That's fair. That's perfectly.
When you have Antifa teachers in public education,
oh fucking
I
kill
don't
me.
have much faith. Did you see that? I know everyone hates Project Veritas on Twitch, but that was a real video of a real teacher, and the parents are freaking out, rightfully so, that their kids. He literally said, "I've got them for this amount of time in order to make them revolutionaries, and I've put protests on a calendar, and they get extra credit from my class if they show up in their black masks and go full Antifa."
I'm pretty sure it is in California though, which I already consider a communist state, so I don't know like how worried I should be. But I have two more points before we can open it up for whatever the general. So I think yes, my show, not yours. You know, I'm definitely platforming you right now. So not the other way around. So for those of you who don't know, that is raw fucking sarcasm. I am fucking tiny creator. Okay, now everybody's caught up. So I think the frustration with lefties or progressives or whatever is that a lot of the criticisms about like human beings being able to provide for their families is something that the left wing tries to address through minimum wage, health benefits, universal health care, like all that kind of stuff. So these are things that would reinforce the family, even though a lot of weird Twitter leftists are anti-family. And then one of the interesting things about like demography and childbirth rates is that like the higher up the socioeconomic scale, the less children you have. So it seems like the richer you get. Like, I don't know if anybody's seen the movie Idiocracy, but it literally shows like the redneck in the trailer park having like 8 kids, and then the 2 people who are like doctors and physicists trying to have 1 kid and then failing to do IVF, and then both of them die. And that's kind of like, it's a meme, but it's real. But then what's kind of happening on a global stage is as material wealth is increasing, we see these shifts in demography in other societies. I don't think anybody would say Japan is a Western nation. They have similar demographic changes. There are huge cultural rifts between Russia and Europe. They're having the same demographic challenges. So it seems like once you hit a certain level of material wealth, you stop having, and like a certain amount of like physical security, you stop having as many kids. And so what I would say is I know it seems like a problem, but it could be a solution. There's obviously a lot of concern on the left about environmentalism, environmental catastrophe, global warming, and all that kind of stuff. Demographic change to the point where everybody on the planet, not just the honkies and the Japanese folks, are only having 2 kids could actually reduce our environmental impact. And that's where I'm saying, like, I know it's alarming, I know it's scary, but if we started looking at what is the society we want to live in, how do we build towards it, and do white people need to have a panic attack, start like holding women at gunpoint in order to have 10 kids to compete with the Hispanics and, the Middle Eastern and North African folk, that's probably not as elegant of a solution as the alt-right is portraying it to be.
All right. Are we allowed to speak? Teacher,
Yeah, I mean,
got my hand up.
listen, you can mute me at any time. You have the power.
Okay. Oh my gosh. I just realized I had myself muted on the stream. Okay. So, one point I wanted to bring up and talk about is the very real experience for some people in communities where immigration has happened particularly quickly. I think there's no denying, in Canada, if you have someone that was here, like to the point where the family that were getting the Chinese head tax and building the railroads in Canada, like, you're probably going to be able to talk to them like an average Canadian, and there's going to be very little difference in how you were raised, the language you use, like very little difference. But particularly in Europe, where immigration is happening at a very fast-paced rate for various reasons, there are communities like Markslow, like Luton, where young Brits who are growing up in Luton feel they're being discriminated against, feel they're being mistreated because they are a minority, which is a very interesting question. Because a lot of leftists recognize there are difficulties in being a minority in a community. And it's talked about all day, every day, online, in school, university, by politicians. Minorities' lives are shit. And given this narrative that is talked about, does it not make sense for there to be a lot of white people that are like, yeah, I don't want to be a minority, just based on what leftists say about being a minority? That sounds like trash. It sounds like a lot of people, if they decide they don't like me, they'll all turn on me at once. I mean, this is part of the reason that, a lot of people became Zionists, and they're like, we want to make Israel so we have our own state where no one can oppress us, whatever people think of that issue. And believe me, it is. We're not going to bring up the Israel-Palestine issue. But the reason people want their own countries where they are the majority is because they want to be able to say, at any point, if people decide they hate X group of people, we've got a country where we are the majority and we won't be discriminated against as many minorities throughout history are.
Yeah, so when you say minorities here, you mean like minorities while still being a plurality, or like statistical minority, like in the
like literally
case
just you
brought?
are a statistical minority. You are 10% of the population, and therefore if the majority of the population decides we hate
Sure.
10% of whatever you look like, whatever your gender or background is,
Okay, sure.
you're shit out of luck, right?
Sure, yeah, that makes sense. So here's the thing. So simply being a minority isn't the issue in and of itself, right? Like there will always be minorities, like depending on how you define things or where you look, people, like there will always be some group that is a minority. The historical issue with being a minority is the historical oppression and stuff that came along with being a minority. So I'm just saying that the status of minority in itself is not what sucks. It's context surrounding being a minority which actually like matters. It's like I don't care that, like, for example, I'm a minority in many regards in many different places, but I don't feel like that is a problem in many contexts. But in other contexts, I feel like it is an issue due to, like, local context and environments and whatnot.
Yeah.
So in this case, I don't like the idea of countries within countries, as someone mentioned. And I don't think the solution to that is it's a complex issue, and I'm sure we can discuss how to avoid that type of situation happening. But I don't think necessarily it means, like, stop immigration or
Yeah.
or immigration is problematic.
Yeah, and to do my addressing of the issue, so I think that the reason why Gasim brought up like plurality, where basically like 40% white or whatever, I haven't seen any statistics that literally put like European whites in America as like a minority. I've seen them become a plurality, where basically they're 40% of the population, they're 45% of the population, and then Hispanics are like between 20 and 30%, and then black folks seem to be pretty stable at 13%, and then Asians seem to be between like 5 and 10%, and those are the projections for 2050. So while still being technically a minority because it's not above 50%, they would be a plurality and the most powerful plurality within the nation.
But I think the question is whether the other groups that are growing are becoming part of like the melting pot or whatever. Someone in my chat made a good point that I've actually observed as well in my own life. Certain communities, like Richmond or areas of Surrey and Vancouver, like you literally can't get by without speaking Chinese or another language, and you will absolutely be discriminated against based on just an observation of your ethnicity.
Yeah, and fuck that. By the way, so the reason why I'm so viscerally against that is because like I think that there is an element of basically bullying people into integration when lefties are like, no, we can't have any standard language, we can't have any standard cultural values, we just need to let people do what's them or whatever. I'm like, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about, because basically there is fucked up shit that goes on in certain communities that is completely morally impermissible inside our society. As an example, animal fighting was is very common in Central Florida amongst Hispanic and Black communities. Basically, chickens and dogs is just like, it's a common cultural thing. We bump into it all the fucking time. Fuck that. That's staying illegal. You're not torturing animals just because you're from a different culture or some shit. And then also
It's illegal.
Yeah, and then
the law kind of trumps,
yeah, and
culture.
and should stay legal. There shouldn't be some like oh, we want to be culturally sensitive, let's not make this legal anymore. And then same thing
Sure.
with language. I think that there should be a state mandated language. I'm obviously partial to English because I love English. It's a very flexible language. You can use the word fuck, Lauren's mom, fuck. I won't say it out loud. You can use it in
I need a sign.
You can use it in a variable of context and people understand what you're saying. I think English is a really fun language. So I think you need those roads of communication and cultural interchange in order to understand each other, or else you do have that nation within a nation concept. And then basically sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I can call it issues. So I think Canada is an interesting example of this because a lot of the immigration that's happening to Canada has been like, I'm not sure, I'd need to look at the data, but it's interesting to see what percentage of Canadian immigrants are first generation immigrants or like currently just immigrated. Because generally speaking, if you're a second generation immigrant, you're probably going to know whatever the most common language is given in the country. Because you said like part of the integration process is through education. And if you're educated in the country of whatever it is, you're gonna probably learn like whatever the local language is. That's gonna happen.
There should be no Chinese language only schools in Canada. Fuck that shit. And same thing with the United States. There should not be any Spanish only American schools. I understand that we don't have a language default in the United States of America, but that is not something that I will ever be for.
Sure. Are you bilingual?
I am.
Well, no, I'm saying like, so you find with like having a Spanish school plus that also teaches English, because I think most I'm not sure if there's a standard, but you're supposed to have like two languages, right, in the US.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it's at the high school level. So weirdly, while I'm like very hostile and like wanting to implement like a single language, I also think that a second language should be taught in as young as elementary schools, because basically the ability to learn two languages simultaneously has shown like insane amounts of like intellectual benefits. But basically, what I want to address two more points. So reinforcing the social institutions that prevent conflict, that's part of the reason why I highlighted those three principles that I care about. And then also woke racism. I think that one of the frustrations for people on the right is they look into the left and they see people who are being bigoted and shitty along immutable characteristics, and there's some people that will make excuses for that behavior, and they'll be like, oh, you don't understand, they came from a hard upbringing and this, that, the other, material conditions this, material conditions that. And I am saying fuck that shit. Okay, sorry, Miss Southern's mom, when you watch this later on. So Basically, no. Like interpersonal bigotry along immutable characteristics. If it's, I don't want to say if it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander. It's not good for anybody. Let's stop it. It's awful. Don't do it to anybody.
I mean, yeah, can agree with that one. And yeah,
Racism bad. Hot take.
This very hot
Racism is
take.
bad. Yeah. Oppression and discrimination is bad. If you, like, a white person is being discriminated against somewhere in Canada, that is bad. I doubt anyone will argue against that. Or
Yeah,
any
and this is, I
reasonable person.
think, what
We'll find
one
it.
of the biggest points of this video is. Well, yeah, is a lot of the things I was talking about in the Great Replacement video and the fears that people have that I'm echoing now actually come from this woke racism and what leftist narratives have been put forward. It is a good thing that white people are being replaced and we want it to happen. So it's kind of like Schrodinger's Great Replacement, where if it's happening and if you think it's a good thing, it's definitely happening. And if you think it's a bad thing, then you're a conspiracy theorist and it's not happening. And like people want to pull out their hair over that. Then there's like, we hate white people, Mayo side, white people are all privileged and they need lessons like Coca-Cola to learn how to not be immutably terrible. And white people are like, man, maybe we do need our own nation to make sure we aren't treated like shit when we're a minority, because all of these people have just said they hate us. They want us to be a minority. Minorities are treated terribly. And literally, I can read The Guardian and it says we deserve consequences and revenge. So what are they going to do to me when they have the power to actually inflict those on us?
So the issue I see is a lot of the people that talk crap about white people and wanting to genocide white people are other white people.
I mean,
and it's
wrong.
mostly and it's mostly I get it, it's mostly edgy humor. Not edgy humor I agree with, and it's bad and problematic. But I just wanted to go over the consequences thing in that whatever the lady said.
Mm-hmm.
I think you kind of read into her statement, like in terms of like the consequences being like punishment or some moral responsibility. And I agree. Earlier I said like she should have used impact, because consequences can be seen in multiple ways. I think impact would have been the correct way. I just don't think it's the people seriously make the argument that white people should be, Mayocide is Mayocide like white genocide?
Yes.
Okay, I don't think people seriously make the argument that yes, we should have white genocide.
Yeah, and while so basically what I want to do is I want to create a united front on at least one subject, which is basically anybody who makes unironic Mayocide jokes needs to be fucking bullied endlessly until they basically get off of social media.
Needs to start with themselves. No,
right. So
don't ban me from Twitch as a joke.
Dang! Yeah, you better call out to Twitch terms of service real quick. Joke. Yeah, all right. So no, but basically, I think it's heartening for me because I think there are some woke dumbasses that will unironically make those jokes. But it was heartening to me, for instance, Destiny Warpath on this subject, where he's like, listen, I used to make excuses for these jokes. Fuck that shit. I'm tired of hearing these jokes. It's no longer jokes. If you make these things, I'm going after you. And then same thing with Vosh. I know there's probably no love lost in any of these circles with Vosh, but even Vosh, one of the things that I respected him most for, while still having a lot of criticisms of the guy, is basically he went to war with his own chat about how not only was Mayocide unoptical, it's just woke racism. And it was literally like an hour-long fight with a bunch of like 15 to 30-year-old communists who wanted to excuse anti-white bigotry as acceptable, and him basically going to war with them over that. So while there are plenty of woke idiots that I don't like basically what I'm saying is there's more room to bully these people and to basically make their perspective unacceptable than maybe most people think there actually is. So I think there's more consensus on this subject than you would believe.
Yeah, and I feel it's also, practically speaking, more beneficial to like frown on that type of behavior as opposed to decide you want an ethnic state, which I don't think they'll solve this thing.
Yeah, the solution doesn't work.
Here's what if I were a leftist, what I would say is that these big creators, Gasim, all of you, you're just hiding your power level until you have the power to genocide me and kill me. As soon as you've got the, the Democratic majority, and.
Listen, but
I mean, I think that's absurd, the hiding the power level thing usually, but there is an aspect. Okay, let's just take it off the question of genociding all white people. Let's just take it off the subject of genociding all white people and just put it towards like a general like oppression or treating worse. If you look at like the Munster Rebellion, one of the big aspects of that story is there were Catholics and then the Anabaptists. And the Anabaptists slowly got into the council in Munster, and everyone was like, oh, it's fine. They're a bit weird, but whatever, we'll take them. And then as soon as the Anabaptists got more than 50% of the council and became the majority, they just slaughtered all the Catholics. They're like, got it. All right. So like this fear of, things might go bad as soon as we don't have the power is not completely unfounded. And it also doesn't mean that you aren't abusing the power while you have it as well. But people would rather be the ones in power abusing their power than the people being abused, right? And this was the argument that I heard very often from white South Africans who are like, well, shit, now all our land is going to be taken. Well, shit, even though apartheid wasn't a good thing. It was better. It's better to be the oppressor than the oppressed. So that's like the vibe that some people feel. And what would you say to people who feel that?
So yes, it's better to be, like, subjectively speaking, for an oppressor group, it's better to be an oppressor than oppressed. But what I would say is, like, life and politics and social dynamics are not a zero-sum game. So while it's better to be an oppressor than oppressed, it's better to not have any oppression at all. It's better to just, have a society where people don't oppress other people.
But is that realistic?
Okay,
Yes,
hold on. This is actually where I am civic nationalist, and I do think we need to encounter extraterrestrials so we can start oppressing them, because I think human beings are I'm memeing, but I'm not. I think human beings are incredibly tribalistic. They're hyper tribalistic. It's rooted into our perspectives on the world. I mean, even look at the rivalries between fucking sports teams. Like, I literally think sports teams are just like an offshoot of like the warrior tribal impulse of human beings to like project violence onto each other. But what I would say is the cool thing about a civic nationalist framework is it basically says like, hey, if you have these 3 or 4 core principles, and if you buy into these dozen to 2 dozen like nationalist narratives or cultural or principled tropes, then you are part of the group now. And then basically that kind of breaks down a lot of the divides, whether that's like ethnicity or language or economic status or anything like that. You can still be a part of the in-group. And then I still think that we have a lot of wars left to fight for the next like 1,000 to 2,000 years without butchering each other along like ethno-linguistic or religious lines. What I mean by that is that one of the primary competitors that we have right now is basically Islamist theocracy and also authoritarian communism. Those 2 threats are real, and they're geopolitical rivals. If we could put aside like ethnic bigotry and linguistic bigotry and actually fight global authoritarianism as a whole, rip it down on an economic, social, political, militaristic level, and then at that point, hopefully like 1,000 years into the future, once authoritarianism is destroyed, maybe we would have moved past the need for like ethno-linguistic tribalism. I'm not saying that that's real. Maybe we'll hate each other forever, but I think it's like an admirable goal to try to view each other as human beings worthy of dignity and respect.
We got a lot of wars to go through there. We still got the religious versus the atheist. I think that'll become a big conflict. Oh, there's those racist dogs again. Sorry if you weren't here for the last conversation. But Gasim, do you agree that we need to find aliens to oppress to fix our problems with racism?
I don't think we need to. I understand where Connor is coming from, and I think it makes it easier, like, to unite against a common outgroup. Makes it much easier. But I don't think it's needed for that to happen. For example, you just touched on groups of like religious versus atheists and whatnot. So like you can say that atheists are a minority, and I'm sure they feel oppressed in some regards. But the thing is, if you have society structured in a specific way, specific institutions, specific basic fundamental agreements about stuff, like you can find like some people might feel slighted here or there, but for the most part, you can have in a society where no group is necessarily oppressing another group, at least not in a fundamentally problematic way.
Yeah, like a mass slaughter. Like if we could avoid like violence in politics is a spectrum. If we can avoid slaughters along like ideological or ethno-linguistic lines, I think that would be a pretty high achievement for humanity. But I do want to. I know we're hitting 2 hours, so we're probably wrapping up. So I wanted to put in at least one point. The assertion at the end that I'm sure everybody wants us to address is basically the great replacement is happening. And I think that's part of the reason why you get dragged so hard on this video is because the original definition of the Great Replacement was a almost like 1-for-1 demographic swap between completely different groups that occurs within a generation based off of like economics and demographics and all that kind of stuff. And then while demographic trends were occurring and like we've talked about the complexities of them, the final assertion after some scary photos and scary videos, the final assertion before the video cuts out is that the Great Replacement was happening. So while you might not have intended it to be like definitionally identical to Camus, it does seem like that would be like the primary attack would be like, you said this is how it's defined. You brought up all these variables that imply that it's happening, and then before you cut out, you said it was happening. And I think that would be the primary line of attack for people who still wanted to critique this video.
Okay,
So
well,
go
ahead,
Lauren,
Gasim.
I'll go after. You sure?
Oh no, I just wanted to, yeah, because it's going to be probably one of my final statements. While I
Okay.
go ahead.
Yeah, so for me, when I watched it again, like I said, I watched Sean's video first. So my main issue with it was, and that was my first like introduction to your work, was like, okay, so like, if you want, my first initial perspective was like, okay, she is probably somewhat alt-right, because and the reasoning behind that is you're familiar with the term moral panic, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So like this type of thing is trying to, like, the way I see it is to incentivize a moral panic about an existential thing, which is generally not good. Like that type of existential threat spreading can lead to a lot of adverse outcomes. So like you said, the shooting that happened, like while the guy might not have watched your video, like the content or the message of the video, which is the original person, whatever his name was, Camus, as a message, which is an existential threat kind of moral panic-inducing message, was actually a contributor to them, taking on that action. So, and that's why I'm saying the replacement is a loaded term, and the data part of the video also. The thing is, like when you watch Sean's video, he just highlights a lot of gaps in the data, and the issue with that is when you say, okay, I'm going to have this data-driven argument, and then there's a bunch of gaps in the data. Did you miss those gaps, or did you intentionally leave them out? So you leave the room open for people to make their subjective judgments on like your intentions, your capabilities. So that is part of the problem I had with the video. So like, and this is just something I wanted to tell you because I see you use the data thing a lot. Data is, there's two types of statistical analysis. You can categorize data, statistical analysis, descriptive and inferential, right? And descriptive statistics generally just describe data, right? They say like, they're generally, like bar charts, percentages, tables. And then inferential statistics is where you try to make inferences based on like data and whatnot. And people often confuse the thing. And for the most part, descriptive statistics aren't traces because you're just describing data as it is. But it's very hard to separate stuff. Like, for example, you can say, like, let's look at crime rates, which is a very common thing, like crime rates in the US and Black people. You can say, like, 40% of violent crimes committed by Black people. But then the inference from that is criminality or violent criminality correlates with Blackness. That is an inference you make. And that is to make that inference is a completely different thing from describing the data. Like the way you go about doing that from a statistical perspective is fundamentally different.
Oh, did I lose y'all?
Yeah.
Not everyone.
Mhm. Like
Cut
people need to
everyone's
just
heads
be.
off in the video.
Y'all thought you
Yeah.
got rid of me,
Welcome
but I keep
back.
coming back.
Yeah. So like people just need to be careful in terms of when they say like data this or data that. That's my point. And the moral panic thing also is problematic.
Okay, so there are a few things that I'll agree with you in analysis and a few things I'll disagree with you. So
Sure.
the moral existential panic thing. So you are kind of suggesting that doing a video that sparks that fear in people is what could have potentially led to things like Christchurch. But I would say that saying the world is going to end because of global warming most certainly brings that moral panic in people, whether it's true or not, right? People are like, we have to literally reduce the human population, shut down these corporations right now, or we are all going to die. And global warming was actually one of the reasons this shooter said he committed his attack. He was an eco-fascist, is what he called himself in his document. So I think we're treading into really dangerous territory when we hold anyone responsible for violence just because they tried to stir up people to make a difference in a political sense. So when it comes to Islam, when a pastor says we must fight this war for Islam, and he's talking about a spiritual war, well, lots of people could say he's responsible for 9/11 then, right? You literally, like Lauren Southern said the same words as this terrorist, you said praise Allah. In fact, you said it every day. How do we know you didn't cause 9/11, right? So we're treading into really dangerous territory when we say morally using colorful language is potentially linked to terrorism. But I will give it to you that there are, part of the reason that I was very, okay, let's get really excitable about this, when I probably could have just come at it from a descriptive data point, which probably would have been a more logical, more educational way to come at this issue than to put all of these inferences on it. The reason I did that was because I saw such a lack of conversation on this. Like, there are all of these problems that haven't been considered about mass immigration, and I'm not seeing anyone talk about them in a logical way, even on like a small level. So I'm going to try to talk about it in a big way that will get lots of attention to this issue. So that's where I would say and I think this is actually where a lot of problems come into play with my old videos, is I always saw me as a balancing act. So everything I did was like very, very strong right-wing perspective. Even if I agreed with lefties on some things, I was like, I am the balancing act. I am saying everything they didn't say and saying none of the things they said, because my job is to balance and not to just, read the data. So, yeah, I would agree with you. There are probably ways that I could have read it that would have just been more descriptive, and it probably would have had more of a long-term effect in having a conversation about it, because people wouldn't be distracted by the moral panic aspect of the conversation. But that moral panic aspect of it came from me literally seeing no one else talk about this from a different perspective other than, great.
Can I? Yeah, and I want to address this because this is so for instance, like even Destiny had like a debate with you earlier in the day, and then like a senior editor of the Huffington Post was like, why are you debating white nationalism? And literally that wasn't the conversation. It was about like alternative media, like the responsibilities of alternative media versus mainstream media, where Destiny was defending the mainstream media, and then you got this guy who's not even paying attention to the conversation making commentary on it. The reason why I bring that up is because when mainstream media is aggressively slanted, commits lies of omission, commits lies of commission, what people feel like, and I feel like this has happened in the alternative media space, is they feel like they have a quest. And that quest is to correct the record, or to represent a faction that isn't being represented, or to forward their own I mean, that's what I do. I forward my own politics. So it doesn't, people feel called to that when they feel like everybody's given like a really shitty shake. And what I think is interesting is that if somebody had come out and talked and said, hey, listen, like rising material conditions have reduced birth rates. It's nobody's fault. It's just something that's happened. You know, people in the West are only having 2 kids. A lot of our economic systems are based on perpetual growth. We haven't figured out how to fix this yet. Automation is on the way, but it's not here to save us right now. A lot of our senior leaders are viewing immigration as an economic stopgap in order to perpetuate the systems that keep everybody happy and healthy and fed. But what that's going to mean is there's going to be a lot more immigration than you're used to. And like, if somebody sober, an adult, had come out and talked about the problems and talked about the solutions as they were being considered, maybe we wouldn't have fucking, I don't know, 20. How old were you at the fucking time? 2017? 20.
20 or 21, probably. Yeah, around that.
I can't tell you all the things I was doing at 20 and 21 because 50% of them were felonies. So what I'm saying is that like the media narrative should not be left up to 20 or 21-year-olds who found interesting information, felt like they were fighting in a cause, felt like they were filling in the world on information that they weren't aware of, and then as a result we have the alternative media space as it exists today. So this is where I'm going to push back against the mainstream media, is if you don't want to see alternative media people basically taking the ball and run with it, then you need to do your effing jobs. And that includes talking about uncomfortable subjects in nuanced and intelligent ways. Yield.
Cool. Yeah, we do have to wrap up here soon, but Gasim, I really appreciate you coming on, and I want to give the last comments to you, as you are the guest. Connor's basically just family on this channel now.
Thanks.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Thanks for having me on. It's been an interesting discussion. Like I said, like I think the last part of the discussion, mostly what I wanted to bring on is that, like, you know, the world is changing. Like, change is not always bad. Like, if you believe in tradition and you believe in culture, and that I don't want to go as far as the marriage of ethnicity with tradition and culture and nationality. But if you believe in those things, there are ways to maintain them that don't involve, you know, having antagonisms with other cultures, other ethnicities, other people and ideologies, basically. If you believe it, I don't subscribe to the whole free market of ideas and that the best ideology is gonna, you know, win and come on top and whatnot. Like, if you believe in something, try to maintain it. I don't personally think I think you could have done this video in a much better way, have it much more interesting, in terms of like, okay, is immigration sustainable? Is it good? Do we have the resources? Because, you know, it's not that easy to have people adjust and integrate them. It takes resources, it takes money, it takes people's time, it takes so on. Do we have these resources to sustain these numbers? You could have just put it in a better way so as to make a reasonable argument and have people kind of discuss it without leading to that other thing, the moral panic stuff. And I wasn't trying to assign moral blame when I was talking about the whole moral panic thing. Because yes, I'm not saying I'm gonna hold people who have problematic statement personally responsible. I can hold them intellectually responsible, you know, like, because let's say they didn't approach this thing the best way possible, or they did a thing that somehow contributed, even though causally weak, like in terms of like a causal relationship, it's weak, can kind of contribute to like broader problematic issues. But that's about it. And like I said, thanks for having me. I'm happy to come back on if you have other related things to discuss. And if you want to reply to what I just said, feel free to do so.
Yeah, well, one thing that I want to highlight there that I like is, for me, even if you are someone who is like completely on the farthest corners of the left or the farthest corners of the right, like you're a full-on, you know, white nationalist, full-on like communist, black nationalist, whatever you are, I find I can have a reasonable conversation with anyone who is coming from the politics of love, is what I call it, where your politics isn't coming from a hatred of another group, but a love of something. So I want X politics. I want communism because I love this group of people, my community. I want conservatism because I love my family and I love this. I want, Black nationalism because I love Black people, not that I hate white people. Even if I completely disagree with their ideology and I think it's stupid, if they come from it from a sense of a politics of love instead of a politics of my politics is based on hating women, my politics is based on hating men, hating Black people, hating white people, I can have those conversations, I find. So I'm not sure if that's exactly the point you were trying to make with, you can try to talk about these problems while not hating other groups. But yeah.
Yeah, because so there's I forget the name of the thingy, but there's a guy that came up with the basic laws of stupidity, and it has like a bar chart where like here is like stupid people are generally people who harm themselves while not getting any advantage out of it. Then over here is like people that harm other people but get an advantage out of it. Those are called bandits. Then smart people are people who help themselves and help other people. And then on the left of there are people who what's the here on the left is top left would be people who okay, yeah, it has a name, but people who basically harm themselves to help other people, I think.
That sounds like what's like pathological altruism.
Yeah, so like people who are basically self-sacrificial. But
yeah.
So the argument is, if you are basically, smart people are the ones who are able to come up, because there's infinite possibilities for all problems, and it's the smart people who kind of get to the best solution, which help themselves and help other people. It's easier to be a bandit or just to be stupid. Honestly, stupid is probably the easiest thing. So people need to try to work towards being smart, help yourself while helping other people. It's not easy, but it's the best outcome.
Wholesome memes, everyone. Wholesome.
Before we kill it, Gasim, I just wanted, as soon as we were talking about addressing this video, you popped into my head, because like I know you're capable of having these complex conversations. I know that you're capable of like basically treating people charitably. And frankly, this is like a rare thing in our world. Like we don't get people who treat each other charitably in this world. We just because it's better to scream at each other. We probably did okay metrically because of the subject matter, but at the same time, it would have been better if we just came in here and we just threw poop at the walls and just screamed at each other for 2 hours, and everybody would be like, "Oh my God, did you see that thing?" So I just wanted to thank you for your efforts, because I feel like it was actually what I wanted to get out of this.
Good.
Yeah, it was a really enjoyable conversation.
Yeah.
Do you have a channel to shout out or something?
No, so don't try to cancel me, because there's nothing to be canceled for.
Where do I direct the angry Twitter people? Because everyone who talks to me gets about 2,000.
Or you can also direct them to Connor's Discord, because I'm there often. If anyone wants to fight me, they can always hop on Connor's Discord to come fight me over there.
Yeah.
Awesome. Wow, what power. Uncancelable. That is, I truly believe there's no greater power right now than just being anonymous online and like no one knowing who you are. I'm way past that point. All I can do is warn other people. Like literally, I don't even have a Facebook account. Like it's just, yeah, that's terrible for for me having a following, but just trying to help out here. All right, Connor, shout yourself out, man. Everyone knows who you are here anyways, but they're all like, where the hell is Connor's Twitch? What's going on?
The 18th we'll be doing the dad bod stream. So unfortunately my hot tub canceled, so I got to find another hot tub in Central Florida that will host me. It might end up being like a kiddie pool with like a fountain if I can't find a hot tub. We'll see. But either way, if you want to see what used to be muscle turned into like slightly pudgy old marine in either a kiddie pool or a hot tub, we'll be doing the inaugural Twitch stream on the 18th. And then after that, we'll be streaming regularly to Twitch. And we're already live on YouTube. So we have like the partnerships, we have the donos, we got the donation things. What are they called? Smart something? I don't know what they're called. Whatever. Anyways, I'm a boomer. You can give me money now. That's what I'm saying. Patreon and Twitch will be launched by the 18th. If you want to find me, Counterpoints in YouTube. We just broke 10K, partially thanks to Lauren over here. And then also you can find me on Twitter _Counterpoints_. So if you want to yell at me or other Twitter lefties, you can do that there.
Awesome. All right. Great chat, guys. If you guys are
One last thing, Lauren. Sorry.
I love
what
how
my-
this has been
'cause-
like one last thing for an hour, but yeah.
Yeah,
so
no. This is actually one last thing because my friend, like the mod also on the server, he specifically asked me to do this when we were like debating it. But he asked me to ask you, do you love black people, Lauren?
I love everyone, yeah. I
Yes,
felt, you know what's so funny is what came into my head
Love
was
black
like the
people.
Xander Hall moment where I'm like, can you say white rights, Xander Hall? And he's like,
you-
white rights, and everyone hated him. All right, so I'll
Can
say
you
black
say you-
rights if you say white rights for me. Black rights. Awesome. They should
White
have them.
rights.
All right,
There we go.
Consensus. Oh, it's beautiful. Oh, my civic heart. Oh my god.
Ugh. All right, disgusting
Well, thanks,
centrist
everyone.
out. I'm booting you. Gone. No
Yeah.
more centrism. This is a hard right stream again. All right, let's talk about what we should do about the communists. No.
All right, catch y'all.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Yeah.
Nice. All right, give me a second. We'll answer questions in a second. I need to unplug my webcam. I need to plug it back in. And then I need to give me a second. I'm doing boomer things over here, all right? So boomer, boomer, boomer. Boomer, boomer, boomer. I'm very happy with that. All right, very cool. Let's switch it to lecture, turn on the video camera. Properties, deactivate, activate. Y'all should be seeing me. Save. I'm fucking ecstatic. I'm ecstatic with that. That couldn't have gone better if I fucking wanted it to. So if you want to, do @counterpoints in the chat and questions @counterpoints, and I will answer them. I love black people. Gary asks, was he even black? Yeah, he's from North Africa. He's from Sudan. So yeah, I mean, you can call him Middle Eastern, but he's really North African. So he's from Sudan. Yes, amazing. All right, I don't have any questions. So politics of love. Don't the Taliban love women? Lol. Yeah, probably. I'm just going to scroll up and check out all the Counterpoints questions while you guys put in the questions. Poika, is Counterpoints bullied Lauren for making viral right-wing videos? I'm on her side now. Lol. Counterpoints on Astartes versus Sororitas sometimes. Can we get Lauren to debate? Can we get Lauren to debate Space Marines versus Sisters of Battle? I don't know. I love them both. I love Sisters of Battle. I love Space Marines. So, you know, no, it's pretty easy for me. Then Poika says, Civnat culture position. Yeah, I'm a Civnat. I believe there's like 3 or 4 things that undergird our society and probably a dozen things that I would be interested in instituting as general principles, and I think they should. So Counterpoint should talk to Keith Woods. I'm down to talk to Keith Woods. I know he's a nationalist. He's an Irish nationalist, but he's one of the smartest fascist philosophers or nationalist philosophers on the internet. I wouldn't mind talking to him because I feel like he's too smart to be bad faith. I think he would just answer the questions that I asked him because he's an intellect. So yeah. All right. And by the way, I'm going to start answering questions, but I only have 2 so far, so I'm just answering them in order as I see them. Grazy174, Counterpoints. Did you see the Sean video? It showed how horrible her statistical analysis of migration was. Yeah, Grazy, I don't know if you caught the beginning part of it, but we basically talked about how you can't use stats to extrapolate out a unending statistical analysis. I probably should have hammered it a little bit hard, but I thought we would have time to do her video and Sean's video, but it turned out that this was nuanced and interesting enough that we were only able to do that. Poika says, laugh my ass off, he's Sudanese. Bro, those are Arab colonists. Oh, no. No, there's North Africans. Are you going to tell me that Tuaregs are Arab? Are you fucking kidding me? Arab means from the Arabian Peninsula. Are you literally going to say all North Africans? We're the fucking, who was it? The competitors to the Greeks started with a C. Come on, somebody help me out. The Phoenicians. It didn't start with a C. But are you going to tell me, like, the Phoenicians weren't African? Like, get the fuck out of here. They might be lighter skinned. He's not West African, but he's still African. And he's darker than us. If you want to say he's brown, I don't give a shit. Zulu says Lauren is a white nationalist. I don't think so. Not after that conversation. I really don't think so. I have personal information that I'm not going to share about her life that I think kind of points away from that, but whatever. Dicky Boy, Counterpoints. Do you worry that Lauren is using you to clean her image and become a reasonable conservative while not having changed at all? I don't know, Dicky Boy. I mean, I feel like we watched that. I feel like we brought up like a majority of the criticisms that we were supposed to bring up, and I feel like Gasim was there to catch the bullshit, and I feel like we called out everything that needed to be called out. Now, is she nefarious? Is she Christian conservative? It depends on where. Okay, so I'm not Christian. I'm not religious. I'm culturally Christian. I believe that religious ethics are important. She is Christian and she's a conservative. So if within your Overton window, Christian conservatives are not acceptable if they're anti-LGBTQ or if they're anti-trans or something like that, then she's still a nefarious character to online politics, I guess. But what's weird to me is that in the United States of America, at least 25-30% of Americans are non-progressive Christian conservatives. So she's not like, that isn't Nazism. That isn't fucking white nationalism. That's literally like boilerplate Christian conservatism. So if Christian conservatism is outside of your Overton window, that's totally fine. But basically what I would say is like a majority of my family is Christian conservative. So I don't know what to do there. She could be using me. Okay, so let's be real here, but let's not be naive, okay? She could be using my wholesome nature and my legitimate centrist and civic nationalist credentials to launder her more nefarious reputation. But when it comes to what people want from responsible platforming, Lauren answering for the perspectives that she previously had, her dealing with criticism of her past, I would be shocked to find if anybody did not like the past 2 hours. I feel like we listened for the dog whistles, we pushed back, we got descriptives from her, we did follow-up questions. I would be fucking shocked if anybody had any criticisms of our platforming. We talked about deep and complex issues while not being dicks about it, which I know is like difficult for this platform, but whatever. I'm not an idiot, so it's easy for me. Jerpost cringe. Does Laura not distinguish immigration from the colonialism that also came with assimilation-driven institutions? Seems weird to compare indigenous assimilation to demographic shift. Yes, but but I think what happened there was more of an articulation of the fear from like the alt-right perspective of mass immigration being a historical parallel to colonialism. So I think that Gasim successfully pointed that out, and like that it was legitimately historically different. And even if we didn't address it in this debate, I think that if she was to assert that as, oh, you know, like whites need to be afraid, like I didn't hear that shit. Did y'all? I didn't hear that shit at all. I basically heard, hey, here's what the circles that I used to run into would assert in this kind of situation. How do you address that? And we addressed it. So I don't know who's fucking shitting pants out there. Jeff Orda at Counterpoints. I thought a good point was missed about the concern of mass migration changing law over time, since Gasim mentioned that bit about religion being tied to law there. Yes. So Jeff Orda, I would like to address this. So for instance, in parts of the United Kingdom, Sharia law can be used in civil court, and it can be used for things like divorce and custody. And while I think that's shit, I can understand how it could be applied, but that's why, like, I would want a civic nationalist, trickle, integrative immigration, and not the fucking doors wide open fucking immigration that leftists advocate for. And that's why it makes me cringe almost to fucking death when they say that we have no underlying principles that unite us, so we shouldn't even bother trying to enforce them. That shit makes me want to fucking... I'm not on Twitch, so I'll just say it sucks. Start a fucking shotgun. It's fucking... fuck that. Point of the claim of welfare migration in Austria, over 60 of social welfare goes to people with migration background. Yeah, okay. So Morge Zorge says that like a disproportionate amount of people use welfare who are from a migration background. This is true. So the question is, second generation, third generation, fourth generation, are those kids on welfare? And their kids' kids and their kids' kids' kids? And if so, why? And how do we address that? If you need to set up while you're a refugee or an asylum seeker or a recent immigrant or something like that, and like you're getting paid under the table $4 an hour, and you're getting like fucking food stamps and a public education. The thing that I care about is not whether or not you're on that temporary assistance. What I care about is, are your kids on that temporary assistance? Because if your kids grow up and then they become a drain on the state, that means that we're not integrating properly. Whereas if your kids grow up and they become solid workers, businessmen, entrepreneurs, doctors, lawyers, or whatever, that's just the fucking American dream. So I don't mind helping out the first generation, but I think second, third, fourth, we need to make sure that these people are succeeding and integrating. Dickie Boy at Counterpoints. I don't even think she's a Nazi or outside the Overton window. I also don't think you are being irresponsible, especially when she is playing League with Destiny. Yeah, I mean, that's part of the thing, right? Is like, I'm being accused of platforming and whitewashing, but at the same time, like all of the debates that I've done so far, I haven't whitewashed any of her perspectives. I've let them fucking float or sink on their own. I've pushed back where I felt like there was need for pushback. In our one-on-one debates, I don't feel like I fucking conceded any ground that was unreasonable. And I'm at 10K. So I'm at 166th her subscribers, and I'm at 150th to 150th of her viewership, depending on the day. So, you know, the people who are accusing me of platforming are fucking insane, and they literally don't know what the word platforming means. Lucentiel, it was a good conversation, and it helped that we didn't have what usually happens with Lauren, which is that the other side starts aggressive and wrong. Yeah, like, I mean, we need to be able to have conversations about complex issues, and I was very happy Gasim was there because I feel like he added a lot. Guys, if you want me to see your comments, you need to do at Counterpoints, because you're writing a lot of text and you're not putting my name in it. So I'll probably run for like another 10 to 15 minutes, and then we're gonna call it. Lauren's on the fence for sure. Most other right-wing creators wouldn't even bother rehabilitating their image and would come out blazing in light of the past 4 years. Yeah. So I don't think she's immovable, but she should move on the things that she thinks are movable and not move on the things that she doesn't think are movable. I never expect her to change her faith, ever. Faith is faith. It's not. I understand that it's not an immutable characteristic, but I am never trying to rob somebody of their religion or their religious perspective. Poika, in my opinion, you can't expect to have a Muslim population without Sharia courts. You have to pick one, or you're just diluting their religion. Yeah, and the question is whether or not we're going to dilute the religion over time. Second, third generation are less devout than first. I think first generation is less devout than second. Second is the most devout, and then I want to say third, fourth, and fifth become less devout religiously, and they kind of fall into the secularization trends of the Western world. 2 times dues. One thing that you touched upon that I agree with is that center-right America, I have the luxury of being welcoming to immigrants. I don't know if I could say the same for European perspectives. Yeah, I don't. I'm considering it from my perspectives, but maybe we'll do a better deep dive when my brain isn't fried. Grazy174, you said at the start of the video address that you can't extrapolate statistics to big trends. It didn't seem like she took the truth of that in regards to how bad she did it in her video. Do I think that she took the truth of that? No, not necessarily, but the point is more, what does the audience take away? So for instance, if she has a Christian conservative or Christian nationalist or alt-light or alt-right audience, and I'm like former alt-light being like enlightenment, so like I believe in Western values, like Jordan Peterson and shit. If they're alt-light, alt-right, Christian conservatives, Christian nationalists, have they heard any of these arguments before? Or have they just kind of been jerked off with their own perspective forever? And if they've been jerked off with their own perspective forever, it would be cool if Lauren shifts. And if she doesn't, then we'll just hit her with the same point whenever she brings up her arguments. But if the audience is being exposed to new arguments that they haven't heard before, that's still of incredible value. So I'm not going to discount that value. Coco Crisp, this is anecdotal, but I went to a pretty big public high school with a ton of second-generation immigrants, and I literally never noticed unless I met their parents. Integration is so easy, inevitable. Yeah, I live in, I went to a law enforcement academy with 2/3 people with Hispanic last names, and they, like, 2 of them spoke Spanish. So out of, like, 30 Hispanic people, 2 people spoke Spanish. It's fucking insane. American integration is very powerful. JH, why do we always have to be outraged at political disagreements? Can't we all just disagree politely? JH, so the argument from a leftist is that the state institutes a certain level of power, whether that's the drug war, foreign interventions, war, all that kind of stuff. So it's, if those things don't affect you, then you can say we can disagree politely. But if you have family members in a different country who are being bombed to death, or if your uncle's an immigrant who got arrested by ICE and deported back to Mexico, it's hard to be emotionally detached from these issues. So while I think that we need to be more tactful in our political communication in order to forward policy better, I don't necessarily think that like we need to. I don't think that like civil discourse is in and of itself a virtue. Anna Dune says, "Is your desire for civic nationalism in America threatened by exclusive ethnic communities independently forming on the county level? Kind of. A truly pluralistic society would allow this." Yeah. So, yeah, I'll think about that. Because I think there's such thing as like kind of like, you know, people of certain demographics kind of like naturally gravitate towards each other. I think it's different to institutionally permit ethnic enclaves at the county level. I think that's weird as fuck. But I mean, we can break it down. Taze with $2. Thank you for the money, by the way. We've officially made $4 today. Super chats are on, so if anybody wants to, you got a money burning a hole in your pocket, I'll answer questions for free. But you know, basically, if you up and there's another fucking there's another dono. Sweet, awesome. Our Taze Grove asks, "Are dad bods halal?" Yeah, absolutely. Of course they are. Name says, "Glad to finally have the opportunity to support your channel. Hope you keep up with your honest work." Name, thank you. And as long as we have people like you who are willing to reward honesty, like I want that to be the brand. I want that to be what we do here. I want us to have like serious and real conversations based on our actual fundamental perspectives. I don't want to find an audience that's just going to be like, "Hey, tell me what I want to hear." That's just not worth it to me. I don't want that. That'll kill me. Jure Post Cringe says, "At Counterpoints, I grew up in a town famous to be great for immigration, so everyone at my school assumed that everyone else was also second generation immigrant. Everybody generally got along." Yeah, that's fucking base. That's dope. I'm not saying the entire world needs to be like that, but we also need to figure out how to basically continue forward as a society without killing each other along ethno-linguistic lines. Grazy174, "It's cool. I just really want to harp on how terrible her statistical analysis in the vid was. Lol. The Sean vid really shows that. Would have been good if you had time for that. Harping over. Smiley face." Yeah, hey, we do what we can do, all right? Like, I'm still... Obviously, I've been doing the YouTube thing for about 2 years. We're getting into the live stream thing now, so it should be fun. Jeff, or shut the fuck up. Y'all are just fucking... Stop it. You're giving me feelings. Don't give me money to have feelings. You understand I do this shit for free, right? Like, I don't want to do it for free. I want to get paid, but I would do this shit for free. So Jeff Order just says, "Stay based for $10. I'll fucking stay based. I'll do my very best, buddy." So, all right. So we're wrapping up. It's 11:42. I don't want to abuse the people who catch this as a VOD. If you're catching this as a VOD, then go ahead and come on out. Come out to the live stuff. I mean, we're going to be doing this almost weekly. We're going to be doing other debates and all that kind of stuff. So if you want to help me support the channel, help us grow, all that kind of stuff, then obviously coming out and just typing comments is going to be helpful. If you want to donate, donate. And if you can't donate, then don't donate. We'll be all right. Radical Right says, "At Counterpoints, debate Nick Fuentes." Yeah, I'm feeling better. Fuck it. Let's do it. Let's do it at some point. So... I was kind of doing this thing where it's like I didn't know whether or not debating Keith Woods or Nick Fuentes would be worth it because they've kind of been pushed outside the Overton window. But the truth is that their value set is not outside the Overton window, and they're still powerful, charismatic characters. So I do think that ultimately we probably do need to talk to them. Dickie Boy says, I give you a $5 in spirit. I can't get the super chats to work. Totally fine. I accept your $5 in spirit, and I feel $5 or £5 richer. Gary says, "Would you debate a real white supremacist, Richard Spencer, for example?" Yeah, it's good. Like, so the reason why I would debate Nick Fuentes is because I feel like he's more slippery. I feel like he's a Christian nationalist. He flirts with fascism. I feel like I understand a decent chunk of his ideology. I wouldn't necessarily have to be a dick in order to understand him. When it comes to like white nationalism, though, it really boils down to like a fundamental moral axiom. It's like, do you think that people need to be with people of their own race in order to thrive and succeed? My answer is no. His answer is yes. We're not going to convince each other. So maybe debating him would be good, so I could present why civic nationalism is fucking based to a bunch of fucking ethnonats. Maybe I help some ethnonats out. But that's really the only reason to debate it. So yeah, I appreciate it. All right, based account risker. Oh man. All right. So I do just want to stay here and answer your questions forever, but I think I need to get the fudge out. Last one, Gray Z. Would you consider Nick Fuentes a white nationalist and he's just dropping that label for optics, or is the distinction from them valid? No, it's different. He's a Christian nationalist. He does want like basically people from different races to stick to themselves, but that's not the same as saying that he wants an all-white country. I think he makes exceptions for ethnic enclaves if there starts to be like South African style like anti-white purges. I think that's what he kind of said, is like maybe we would need to break off into ethnic enclaves. But there's even like black and Hispanic and Indian groypers who basically think like, oh, I'm a conservative, I'm Christian, I want a trad-con waifu, but I do think our ethnicity should stay separate, which is not necessarily the same as creating like a white ethno state. All right, so yeah. So Poika says, sorry, I know I need to fucking hit end stream, but Poika says the fact that Nick Fuentes spent 2 whole years infighting with actual white nats kind of answers your question. Yeah. I would not put Wignats and America First Groypers in the same box. They are a different faction. They do have different reasons for why they're doing it. And honestly, I'd rather talk to him about why he does what he does and hope to just get honest answers. So I appreciate y'all. I'm dipping out. You have an excellent evening. Have a good one. Catch you in the next one.